Freida McFadden is a doctor turned thriller author who I've covered before on my channel for her books which excuse CSA and grooming, and The Ableist Nightmare, which was Ward D, which massively stigmatized mental health problems. After those videos, I had, especially the Ward D one, I had a lot of people in my comment section saying like, wait, is Freida McFadden actually a doctor? Like, do we know this for sure? Do we believe this? Because her medical knowledge and the way she wrote about hospitals and the healthcare system, especially in Ward D, seemed a bit off with some people, and we all know Freida McFadden is a pen name, so we don't really know who she actually is or what her actual background is. Because of this, I decided to do a little bit of digging, and I found that before she was writing books, Freida went by the name Fizzy or Dr. McFizzy online, and she had a couple of blogs. One was private and we don't currently have any access to it. Another one, which was like her main blog, it went through a couple of different names I think, but it ended up being called A Cartoon Guide to Becoming a Doctor, Lessons on the Medical Training Process from Somebody with Absolutely No Artistic Talent. She even offered as a disclaimer, all stories told on this blog are entirely fictional, even the ones that are true are entirely fictional. Any resemblance to actual events, locations, or persons, living or dead, is coincidental and clearly some self-absorbed person deluding himself. By which I mean she was totally writing about her real life, but she wanted some plausible deniability by saying like, oh no, it's totally fictional, it's true, but it's totally fictional. Freida began writing during the time that she was writing this blog, and during, I think it was kind of like lockdown-ish, her books began to really blow up on TikTok, and she started to get more and more popular, and she ended up posting in April 2020 that she was taking a hiatus from writing her blog. She said, taking a hiatus from blogging for now. This coronavirus thing has been really hard, both as a parent, as a daughter, and as a physician. It's hard watching patients get sick with this, and it's scary to know taking care of them means I could get it. But I'm going to keep doing what I do as long as I still can. Stay healthy, everyone. This was her last ever blog post, to the best of my knowledge. A little while later, this blog, this cartoon guide to being a doctor, was deleted, and Freida tried to wipe its existence from the internet. The Wayback Machine, however, has an archived version of it which is available to read. I'm not sure it's captured every single post she's ever made, but it's got a hell of a lot of them. And I've screenshot quite a few and created a document where you can read through, in chronological order, a lot of her blog posts. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Just if you're interested, you can do that. I'll leave it linked in the video description. It's just meant to be like a little extra thing to this video where, like, if you want a little bit more context around, because basically, between the two of her blogs, and we'll get to the second one in a minute, there were like 600 pages of posts, and I was like, I can't cover all of this in a video, but I know a lot of people will be interested, but you maybe don't have time to go searching through the Wayback Machine like I did. So I've kind of put it all together, so if you want a little bit more context to this video, you can go and get it that way easily. Obviously, all the content on there is still Freida's, but yeah, it's just to make things a little bit easier for you guys if you're interested. Today I want to focus on looking at just a few of these posts because I think they're quite enlightening in terms of telling us who Freida is, a little bit about her background, how yes, she actually is a doctor, and you can definitely see where some of the attitudes we see in her books come from. For example, her judgy attitude towards patients in her blogs maybe explains why she's so judgy towards especially mental health patients in her book Ward D, and so on. There were actually as well, through her blogs, a few posts that really surprised me in a good way. While Freida often came across as rude and judgmental in a lot of her posts, there are also a few where she really impressed me by talking about things like the need for a better healthcare system in America. She is quite liberal in her political beliefs, and she's outspoken about them at times. There's times when she was advocating for a child victim of CSA, and I think they're all brilliant, brilliant things, and it surprised me because I didn't expect to see them from Freida. So seeing her write about them in their blog, I was like, ooh, this is a new side to her that I've not seen before, and I like this side. That said, there were also a lot of posts where I was like, oh, well, if I liked that, I don't necessarily like this, because she was coming across as a little bit of a mean girl at times. There was a fair bit of misogyny. There was a lot of judgment towards women, and especially their appearance in a lot of her blogs, which really bothered me. And overall, it seems she kind of hates being a doctor, which is interesting. But like I say, this cartoon guide to being a doctor wasn't her only blog that she contributed to. She also contributed a lot, around 220 posts or more, to a blog called Mothers in Medicine, where she is described as, again, she goes by the name Fizzy on this. Fizzy is a PM&R attending with 2 small daughters and a non-medical spouse. Her hobbies include reading, baking cookies with said daughters, blogging at A Cartoon Guide to Becoming a Doctor, and repeatedly explaining to people what PM&R is. And just to be clear, PM&R is physical medicine and rehabilitation, which John Hopkins says is a medical specialty that works to restore function for a person who has been disabled as a result of disease, disorder, or injury. Meanwhile, she started her personal blog, The Cartoon Guide to Being a Doctor, with the description, "I'm a physician who has finally come to the end of my grueling medical training, and I have at least enough time to publish the wealth of cartoons I've created over the years. If you enjoy them, please comment. If you don't enjoy them, then you can just keep your fool mouth shut." A little aggressive at the end there, but okay. This inability to take criticism is something you will see throughout her blog posts, and she does get a little bit angry and mean towards people who are critics sometimes. Sometimes understandably, sometimes not so understandably. It's a mixed bag. The Mothers in Medicine blog started in June 2008, whereas the Cartoon Guide to Becoming a Doctor blog only started in 2010. So I'll be going through some of this in chronological order, sometimes a little bit all over the place. But mostly I'm going to structure this video in terms of like talking about themes of blog posts that she wrote about. And within those themes, they'll be mostly chronological, but it's also a little, like, I'm trying to tell a story here, basically. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to paint a picture of who Freida is so we can get a good idea of her good points, her bad points, and understand her background to try and understand her writing style and her views a little bit better. Also, as a little introduction, if you're new here, hi, my name's Rachel. I talk about everything from books and poetry and do in-depth analysis of them. I do a lot of social commentary, especially around intersectional feminism, and I just talk about whatever interests me. Sometimes it's a little serious, sometimes it's more fun and lighthearted. Sometimes, like today, I'm looking into an author that I find fascinating because I'm not really a fan of her books, but her as an individual, she just intrigues me. You know, I find her, like I say, fascinating for both good and bad reasons. If you're new here, it'd be wonderful if you want to subscribe and come on this journey with me and the rest of us. And if you're not new here, hi, welcome back. This is my first time filming in a while because a lot of you know, 2 weeks ago yesterday, I had to say goodbye to my best friend in the world, my soulmate, my daughter, my just absolute perfect little dog, Kyra. And it's been hard. Luckily, I'd done all the research for this video before it happened. And so in the 2 weeks since, I've been struggling to get out of bed. I've been struggling to function. And I've been trying to work on this script, and it's been difficult because I can't concentrate on anything. And I'm feeling quite woozy at the minute, and I'm really out of it. My doctor's increased my antidepressant medication, which is making me a little bit foggy-brained. I'm a bit all over the place, and this is my first time back on camera since. So, thank you for joining me today. Thank you for everyone who's been patient while I'm still in the grieving process. Like, you know how hard it is. And yeah, it's not been a good time, but thank you all for your patience while I've been going through a lot. And thank you for your patience today if my brain isn't quite where it normally is. I'm still going to try and put out the best content I can for you guys, but I just appreciate your kindness and patience during this time. I've not really been very good at replying to messages or anything at the minute because I've been spending most of my time sleeping, to be honest. I've been an absolute wreck. Sleeping and crying have been the majority of my daily activities. I've been trying to see my friends when I can, and yeah, it is, I don't know. I went out once and I ended up crying there as well, so it's a bit all over the place, but yeah, I don't even know what I'm saying. I just want to thank everyone who's sent me kind messages and been so lovely. I've had people send flowers and gifts, and it's been really, really kind, and I really, really appreciate every single one of you for how lovely you've all been. And I just want to say that before we go any further today. And again, sorry if I'm tripping over my words a bit. I'm still not quite with it. But yeah, we're gonna get through this together. We're gonna be okay. We've got this. Okay, so Freida's first public blog post that I can find online at all that hasn't been wiped was on the Mothers in Medicine blog on the 4th of June 2008, and it was titled The Doctor's Doctor. And it doesn't present Freida in the most likeable way right off the bat. She comes across as a bit self-righteous, a bit egotistical. Some of it I can kind of understand, but also I'm like, I don't necessarily like the way she comes across in this blog post. I kind of feel like a failure when I bring Melly, that's her daughter, to the doctor, because I'm a doctor. Sort of. That's what it says on my badge. So naturally, I should be able to diagnose any medical problem that comes up, then prescribe amoxicillin to treat it. My current excuse for my poor pediatric diagnostic skills is a lack of proper equipment. I don't have the tiny stethoscope like my pediatricians, and I'm fairly sure the stethoscope I use for work is colonised with MRSA and every other bug I've come across in the 6 years I've owned it. It's pretty much a petri dish. Melly tried to lick it once and I almost had a heart attack. Don't don't think that's normal. Clean your equipment, yeah? Also, I left my otoscope at my mother's house and there's absolutely no possible way I can get it short of some sort of experimental matter transportation device a la the fly. Yeah, if only I had my otoscope, it would be no problem to stick that thing in her tiny ear to visualise her eardrum while she's flailing about wildly, because I was just so good at it as a med student. The sad truth of the matter is that I'm lucky if I can even get a temperature for her. That ear thermometer we bought is very suspect. I took her temperature on it once and got 102.4, then took it 2 seconds later and got a 97.5. So what am I supposed to do? Average the numbers? Part of the problem is that I have too much knowledge for my own good, but not enough knowledge to do anything useful. Like when she's drooling a lot, instead of assuming that she's teething, I think, oh my god, is this epiglottis? What if will this require intubation? And slowly I lose my mind. I recall in med school that my worst exam grade was in my pediatrics rotation. Damn, if only I'd studied harder, I could have saved so many $20 copays. And I understand when you have a bit of knowledge in an area like medicine, you might jump to the worst case scenario. And I know she's trying to be funny here and be like relatable to other doctors, but like, I find it so difficult to find someone likable or have empathy for them when they're saying lines like, I was just so good at it in med school and I have too much knowledge for my own good. And I have too much knowledge for my own good, and blaming any faults on the equipment and not their own lack of expertise in that area. Like, there's a reason you train to specialize in a certain area, and like, not just every doctor can do every field, you know? Anyway, I couldn't help but compare her to my own sister-in-law, who's a GP, and like, I can't imagine her ever saying something like this or making these kinds of jokes, you know? I found her super unlikable straight off the bat. Then again, on the other hand, in other posts, I found her quite relatable and I understand her concerns, and there's a few things I really liked. For example, June 2008, so not that much later, Cinderella isn't pre-med. The vast majority of our TV viewings these days are dedicated to the Disney princess sing-along videos. The songs in these videos feature only the princess of the Disney movie, such as Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, Cinderella, Princess Jasmine, etc. Shout out to Jasmine, by the way, she's always been my favourite, I love her to bits. Melly loves them, so we've been subjected to each of these videos roughly 5,000 times in the couple of weeks since we've discovered them. It's gotten to the point where I'm subconsciously humming A Whole New World while examining patients and they look at me like I'm nuts. Between each of the songs, there's a narrative that I find rather disturbing. For example, after the Cinderella song, the narrator states, Cinderella finally lived out her dream of going to a ball in a beautiful dress. Is that your dream too? And so on. It sort of emphasises the point that Disney movies have two kind of female characters. One, the princesses who have developed a deep malaise which can only be cured by an exciting new man, and two, poor girls, usually also abused by their stepmothers, who are eventually saved by a handsome prince, often while wandering through a forest and singing. Between the popular Disney movies and dolls that pronounce math class is tough, it seems like a miracle that so many women have high-powered careers these days. My husband and I get nervous that if we don't turn off the Disney videos, Melly is going to end up doomed to a life of dancing in forests with strange princes. My dream for her is to be a mathematician, which is about as far as you can get from going to a ball in a beautiful dress. So while I still have some issues with some of the stuff she writes here, in particular that last line, because like, please, I'm amazing at maths and still find time to wear pretty dresses. You can do both if you want to do both. Overall, I get it. I think this is a valid concern of mothers, especially in 2008 when she was writing this. Disney films at this time did have more of a focus on woman is safe by man, blah blah blah, and less on young women finding themselves. Things did get better with time because people like this were pointing it out. You know, after this point, we did get that kind of Disney film that was focused on these strong women, like Brave, Frozen, The Princess and the Frog. You know, I think it's brilliant that we've got more of those films now, but this was written in 2008 before they were released, and so I think these are genuine concerns, and I relate to her. I think she makes good points. Again, I find her likable for pointing this out. Like, this is great. Then again, sometimes I find that, like, instead of making good points, she's just comes across as sucking the fun out of everything. For example, in a similar vein, March 2009, how many of you were hit on the head with mallets last week? My daughter's really into Donald Duck right now, so I've watched about 5,000 Donald Duck cartoons on YouTube in the last week or so. Believe it or not, they all seem to follow a similar format. Donald does something to pee off some kind of woodland creature, then they get revenge on him. So you can see this is already like, this blog post is a similar setup to the Disney one, but where the Disney one I think had valid points, this one just seems like fun sucking. In the past week, I've seen Donald fall from a 30-foot tree, plummet from several cliffs, and be exploded countless times. As I was watching him run his sled into a tree stump masked by a snowman, I couldn't help but think of my patient who ended up with serious brain or spinal cord injuries because they hit a tree on the ski slopes. As Donald made impact with the tree, I winced as I thought about the broken bones, halo vests, intubation, central lines. But none of that happens in cartoons, obviously. Like, does she want cartoons to show, like, deathly injuries to children? Like, I'm confused. I don't know. Slamming into a tree at 60 miles an hour is definitely an annoyance to Donald, but the only thing he appeared to damage in the accident was the winter coat he was wearing. The winter coat was virtually destroyed beyond repair. When a bunch of ants push him off a 100-foot cliff to get his picnic basket, he yelled out in fury and climbed right back up the cliff to get revenge on those ants. When 10 sticks of dynamite explode in his face, he just adjusts his beak and moves on. Yes, I know cartoons are not supposed to be realistic, but this is really beginning to bother me. It disturbs me not just as a mother who wants my daughter to know the consequences of violence, but also as a doctor who has seen countless veterans with severe permanent brain damage from IED blasts. I need to see Donald experience the consequences of his actions in some way. I mean, they don't have to show him on a ventilator, but if he falls off a cliff, at least show him limping a little in the next scene. And for the record, a second bonk on the head is not a cure for brain injury. Also, sorry I'm struggling to talk today. I've barely spoken 21 in 2 weeks, I'll be honest, and I feel out of practice. I feel like I'm kind of slurring my words a bit and I'm not speaking very well, so again, I'm sorry and thank you for your patience. Her posts, like I say, definitely sway between kind of feminist and relatable and making some really good points to being hateful and misogynistic, and it's quite confusing, but also quite normal, you know? Freida, despite that not being her real name, is a real person, and like all of us, she contains multitudes, you know? We can like some parts of her and criticize others. I think that's just a part of being a normal human person. You know, we don't have to like every part of someone. Again, to look at another example, when she started her personal blog in 2010, her posts seemed fairly harmless. You know, she was just making these silly, poorly drawn cartoons about being a doctor, but there weren't problems with most of them. You know, uses for surgical gloves, taking your house on a magical adventure as inspired by Up. That's silly, that's harmless, that's funny. Evolution of a doctor's handwriting, caffeine overdose, blah, blah, blah. And yet some of them started to verge into judgy and misogynistic. For example, lamest resident Halloween costumes. One, a doctor. Okay, that's quite funny because you are a doctor, it's lame to do that, that's funny. But then the last one is sexy cat. Again, it's not world ending, it's not something that like I'm gonna be like, oh, she's a monster for doing this, but I'm just like, feels a little misogynistic, you know what I mean? It's just But on the whole, her cartoons were not especially harmful. Like I say, I think I read something like 600 pages of blog posts or 600 screenshots of blog posts or more in preparation for this video. So I think the best way to tackle this going forward is to categorize the interesting posts and go through them one by one. We're going to start with the positives because I need a little positivity in my life right now. There are, thankfully, a number of posts she writes which I imagine will be of great help to others who are mothers and quite relatable to them. I also think it's great that she calls out a fair amount of inequality and problems that working mothers face. I think these blog posts that she writes are invaluable, and I think it's a really positive thing to put out there. For example, May 2010, she wrote a blog post on the Mothers in Medicine blog called Mummy Guilt. I've noticed one common theme on this blog: guilt. As working mothers, we often feel guilty. We feel guilty for not spending enough time with our kids, and at the same time, we feel guilty for not working hard enough at our jobs. After I was recently saying how I felt bad that my husband had a longer commute to work than I did, a male attending said to me, "You're always feeling guilty. I never feel that way. Ever." Men don't write blog posts about how they feel bad they missed putting their baby to sleep 2 nights last week. They don't obsess over the fact that their infant got 1 bottle of formula instead of breast milk. Ever notice that there aren't any male boob Nazis? And they don't attend lectures about how to achieve a work-family balance. There isn't going to be a blog called Fathers in Medicine anytime soon where men talk about the challenges of balancing fatherhood and a career as a physician. Not to say male physicians don't love their kids, because I know they do, but they don't have the kind of guilt that we do. Actually, I'm a little jealous. Maybe we should all try to be more like men and not feel so damn guilty all the time. And I think these are great points well made. Like, obviously I'm not a mother myself, but I know while Kyra was ill, especially like the last few months of her life, she was having seizures and things like that, and she was having daily medication, and like there was a lot of stuff going on. I was taking her for regular blood tests and everything. And the doctors also suspected that she had dementia, so I was constantly worrying about like her anxiety and dealing with memory issues for her and stuff like that. So I constantly felt this guilt where I was like, I can't do my job well enough because I'm looking after Kyra, but I can't look after Kyra all the time because I have to do my job and pay our bills. And so I felt like I wasn't a good enough YouTuber and I wasn't a good enough mother, and I was constantly balancing that guilt between them. And I had everyone around me telling me like, you're working yourself so hard, you're burning yourself out, like you're doing fine at both of them. And I was like, but I don't want to do fine at both of them, I want to excel at both of them. And you can't do that because there's just not enough hours in the day. And it was so hard. I was giving myself so much anxiety and not sleeping properly, and it was horrific. And so that was just like 4 months with an ill dog. I can't imagine what it's like for mothers like Freida McFadden, who are working such an intense job as being a doctor while raising 2 kids. Well, she had 1 at this point, but you know, a few years later it was 2. While raising 2 kids, like that guilt must be immense and the stress must be immense. So I really commend her for talking about it and speaking out about it and raising awareness of these issues and saying, hey, men rarely ever feel guilty for this stuff. Why do they not have these feelings? Like, why are we the ones to shoulder the burden? I think, well, I can only commend her for talking about that, really. Similarly, I appreciated posts like this in which she normalised mothers choosing what is right for them and their own child in regards to feeding and breastfeeding versus bottle feeding and so on. March 2011, breast pump outrage. Breastfeeding is one of those issues that can be extremely controversial amongst mothers. Dads don't seem to care so much. Love that she's pointing that out again. For the record, I think breastfeeding is a woman's choice. If a mother feels that for whatever reason she can't do it, I don't think we should chastise her. It's horrible that some women will approach a mother feeding her baby a bottle in public and feel the need to comment to this stranger that the baby should be getting breast milk. If you've ever approached a stranger and said something like that or given any sort of unsolicited parenting advice, you're nuts and should mind your own business, just so you know. Again, obviously I'm not a mother myself and I never will be, but when I see other people trying to tell people what the best way to feed their kid is, like, it does bother me, and I'm like, why are you getting involved? It's not your business. What you do or do not do with your body in regards to using it as a source of food for your child or not is entirely your business, right? So again, I think it's great that Freida's calling this out. I'm fully with her on this. In other important posts that are really positive, she pointed out the importance of birth control and how it's helped so many women. Again, this is something I'm personally very passionate about, and it's great to see others talk about. I commend her for this. So this was January 2012, Ode to Birth Control. Sometimes people write into Mothers in Medicine with guest posts asking, should I become a doctor? Whatever the answer to that question is for you, the truth is that none of us would be doctors, and this blog wouldn't exist if not for one thing: birth control. My great-great-grandmother had 10 children. She wasn't so much thinking about whether OBGYN or family medicine was the right choice for her. I don't know if she worked, but she sure wasn't considering a career that involved nearly a decade of intense training. It wouldn't have been possible. The earliest female physicians, such as Elizabeth Blackwell, were unmarried and didn't have to worry about children. Most women with any sort of career were unmarried. Being pregnant non-stop and caring for a brood of children makes it very hard to have a career outside the home. I think it's easy to forget that up until recently, birth control wasn't a given. As recently as the 1960s, many states actually prohibited use of contraception. In 1965, the Supreme Court ruled that a Connecticut law prohibiting the use of contraceptives violated the right to marital privacy. It wasn't until 1972 that the case of Eisenstadt versus Baird explained the right to possess and use contraceptives to unmarried couples. That's only 40 years ago. Obviously more now when we're reading this, but when she was writing. Yeah. Think about what your life would be like if birth control wasn't available to you. What would your career be like if you had 10 children like great-great-Grammy McFizz? What if birth control was suddenly taken away from you? How would that affect your career and your family? So I have to say a great big thank you to birth control and express my anger, see better now, that there are people out there potentially in positions of power who would like to take it away. So again, I have to completely commend her for saying this and speaking out about it. I think it's brilliant. Similarly, there are posts like this. This was on her personal blog in January 2018. An education on late-term abortions. I was recently talking to a friend of mine named Joe who works in healthcare and is an intelligent, well-educated person. The subject of abortion came up and Joe told me he was pro-choice, but I just don't think women should be allowed to have abortions at 37 or 38 weeks pregnant. That's just wrong. I think I gasped audibly and said, oh no. I didn't understand how a smart guy in healthcare could believe women were having abortions 2 weeks before delivery. Or putting it another way, that there are doctors out there who are effectively willing to murder full-term fetuses. Donald Trump said it during a debate though, and while people did point out that this is ridiculous, I always felt like a big enough deal wasn't made of it. Our presidential candidate believed women are allowed to have abortions at full term. How can we brush that off? I calmly tried to explain to Joe why this logic made no sense, and he quickly said, I don't want to talk about it anymore. And that was the end of the discussion. Now, I'm someone who sympathises with people who are genuinely pro-life. I have female friends who believe life starts at conception and can talk intelligently on the subject. I am willing to listen to anyone who does not just want to ban abortion as a way to punish women for having sex. But the issue of late-term abortion is one that I think is confusing to a lot of people, and I genuinely believe that very few of the politicians, especially the ones that try to ban abortion after 20 weeks, really understand anything about it. And then she links to what she calls an incredible article by an OBGYN about late-term abortions. She says, here are the highlights. 1. Late-term abortions make up about 1% of all abortions, so banning them does not really reduce abortion rates that much. 2. 80% of late-term abortions offer serious birth defects, many of which are incompatible with life. Should politicians really get to decide if women have to spend 4 months with a baby with no brain in her uterus? Why is that even a political issue? Completely agree with her. 3. Most of the remaining 20% offer serious maternal health reasons. 4. After 24 weeks, abortion is never performed, delivery is always attempted. Essentially, these politicians want to keep women with the most heartbreaking situations, tragic birth defects, life-threatening conditions, from getting medical treatment. I can't figure out any way to justify it other than ignorance about late-term abortions. And again, I think it's brilliant that she's speaking out about this, I really do. It's brilliant that she's pointing out all the misinformation and correcting it. And 8 years after Freida wrote this blog post, misinformation is still being spread about online. I still think we need people like Freida and others like her who are educated in this matter to speak up about it. So again, I commend her for that. There are also a few political posts that she makes. Now, recently I've covered a lot of right-wingers on my channel, but I'm pleased to say that Freida, despite, I had some worries about her, she's not right-wing. Thank God. And she is very outspoken about her hatred for Donald Trump and seems to be quite a fan of Obama. Here's just a couple of examples, but don't let the first line of this first post I'm about to read fool you. She is very against Donald Trump. She does not actually like him. This was August 2015, and she titles the post, Misogynist. I like Donald Trump. I truly do. Because the guy is just the biggest bumhole ever and has no chance of winning the election. Oh, I wish she'd been right. Which I'm sure he realises, so I can only assume that he's just running for our personal amusement. So I really appreciate that he's spending so much money just to make this election fun for us. I wish she was right. God. That said, if we were to take his candidacy seriously for a minute, I can't fathom how any female in her right mind would ever vote for him. Is there something I'm missing? 1, this guy sponsors the Miss America pageant, which obviously completely objectifies women. And he was a total creep while he did it. 2, he's publicly referred to women, see Rosie O'Donnell for starters, as ugly. 3, he may have raped his wife, and when his wife accused him of this, his lawyer stated that you can't rape your wife, so obviously he's innocent. He's also raped other women, let's be real. 4, he called a female lawyer disgusting for wanting to break a trial to pump milk for her 3-month-old baby. Gross. He keeps doing that to women though, doesn't he? He keeps calling them names like piggy and like disgusting, so he's not changed at all. 5, when a woman does something to pee him off, his first response is to suggest she's on her period. I hate Megyn Kelly, but that was still really obnoxious. Agreed. 6, he seems to believe vaccines cause autism. Well, maybe Jenny McCarthy would vote for him, so that's one woman. He still does to this day, doesn't he? And now he thinks paracetamol causes it as well. Insane. I know he has 18% of the Republican vote right now, but I find it really hard to believe that any of those 18% are women. Oh, I wish she'd been right. In another post, this was February 2016, she called this one Lesser Evil. She says, I haven't written anything political on here in a long time, but I have to say, with the primaries officially underway, I spend a good amount of time with my husband, who I usually agree with politically, arguing over our choice of candidates. He thinks that Trump becoming president is the worst thing that could happen to this country. I think that Ted Cruz becoming president is the worst thing that could happen to this country. You know, I hate to say it, but I think her husband was right on this one. In reality, the idea of Trump becoming president is incredibly frightening, but on the other hand, Cruz is vocally against the issues that are personally really important to me. Gay marriage, Planned Parenthood /abortion /birth control, global warming, gun control, Obamacare. Don't get me wrong, Trump is on the wrong side of all these issues, but not quite as vehemently. Oh, how things have changed. He's still against all that stuff. He's just, oh, bless her. She tried. On The Daily Show, they compared it to a blood clot versus cancer. I can't remember who was who. I mean, sadly, I think she was wrong here because Trump has done nothing but destroy America, especially in his second term. But, yeah. She was also outspoken about supporting sexual assault survivors, especially when they were children. So, for example, here we go. This was December 2014, and the post was titled, "Sexual Abuse is Okay." I had a patient in residency who had a brain injury, and we couldn't discharge him to his parents' house because he sexually abused his sister when she was 9. She's 14 now, and the patient had been living with his grandparents, so he wasn't near her. I was mentioning this to the new attending, and he was like, "So what? He sexually abused her a long time ago. He should still be able to live there." Okay. I was told that if he goes back home, we have to report it to Child Protective Services. That's not true, the attending insisted. He hasn't expressed any intent to hurt her, so we don't have to report it. The sexual abuse was long ago. It was 5 years, that's not long ago. Yeah, but he's already attacked 2 women here. But his sister won't be involved in his care, the attending said. They'll be living in the same house, but she can avoid him, and she can leave the house if she wants. Mate, she's 14. I didn't even know what to say to that. I mean, how would he like a serial killer living in his house, provided the murderer hasn't specifically stated he's going to kill him, and he doesn't have to go near him? I was totally baffled by the fact he thinks there's nothing wrong with making a 14-year-old girl live in a house with a guy that abused her. And she can leave the house if she wants. WTF, she's 14, not 40. Where was she supposed to go? And again, I can't commend her enough for speaking up for this girl and advocating for her and calling out this nonsense. I genuinely like this side of Freida. I think this is great, seeing her stand up for people and be so kind and be so supportive. Brilliant. And finally, I just want to point out this post. This was June 2013, and this is one of her weekly whines, which is something we'll see. She does a weekly whine segment quite a lot, where she whines about stuff. But this one it's called Compassion. Sometimes I post about topics that don't affect me currently or directly, but I've noticed the effects they have on other people. For example, when I talked about how crazy hard it is to pay nanny taxes, or how people with small kids should get extra flexibility in choosing which holidays to have off. No matter how many times I reiterated that I do not and will never have a nanny, or that my work gives me all major holidays off automatically, people keep insisting that I'm being selfish and entitled. I mean, I'm pro-choice, but I have never and probably will never have an abortion. I'm pro-gay marriage, even though I don't want to marry another woman personally. People are capable of caring about issues that don't affect them directly. You can call me wrong if you want, but I'm not selfish for making a post to help people who are not me. And again, love this side of her. I think this is brilliant. I also speak out frequently about topics which don't personally affect me, and I fundraise for charities that I'll never be personally helped by, because like Freida, I care about people, you know? When I've done fundraising for charities like Forward, which often help women who are survivors of child marriage or FGM, people are like, well, why are you like talking about that? Why it doesn't affect you? Why are you talking about that? I'm like, because I care about other people. I have compassion for other people. Just because something doesn't affect me, that doesn't mean I don't want it stopping, because I care about the people who are affected by it, you know? It should be obvious, but it's surprising how rarely I see other people advocating for this. So Freida being outspoken about it is something that I really, really respect and really like about her. But I think that's a considerable chunk of the positive stuff done and out of the way. Now let's talk about some of the things that I have a few criticisms of. And I think one of the biggest themes in Freida's posts, unsurprisingly, is about her focus and experience on motherhood. And just to be clear, I have absolutely no issues with her writing about and speaking at her own experience with it. As we saw in the last section, I think this can be a really positive thing, because she can speak about things that other people relate to. She can be really helpful for other people. However, one of her core messages in many of her blog posts is this idea that all women need to have kids, all women want to have kids, and all women should have kids, and if you choose not to, she will judge you for it. She is very judgmental of child-free people, and that's what I have a bit of an issue with. So let's take a look at a few examples. One of her first posts on this issue was from June 2008, and this was titled Advanced Maternal Age. My OB told me an interesting story during one of my routine pregnancy checks. Well, sorry, I'm really struggling to see without my glasses today, sorry. When she was starting her residency, one of the first lectures the residents got was about how fertility declines sharply after age 30. She said it was kind of scary the way it was presented. And sure enough, a few months later, all the female residents in the program were pregnant. Lesson: don't talk to your female residents about declining fertility. I had a baby at age 27, which is above the mean age for a first baby in this country. 25, I think. But well below the mean age for a first baby among my colleagues. I think this average has gone up since Freida wrote this blog post. Wait, 18 years. Oh my god, this blog post is 18 years ago. Wow. Yeah, average maternal age has gone up quite a bit since then. In some areas of America, it's as high as 28.5, I think. Her next blog post on this was a few days later, June 2008, baby making in medical school. I gave all the female pre-meds that I meet the same possibly controversial advice. If you want to have children before 30, you should seriously reconsider your decision to go to med school. And this is where I start to feel a little annoyed with her. She's more than okay letting women decide what to do with their own bodies when it comes to things like breastfeeding, but when it comes to deciding when to have kids or if to have kids, Freida is more than happy to lecture them about what's right and what isn't. So her advocacy for bodily autonomy only goes so far, you know? And of course she seems to think that all women are baby obsessed, as she makes statements like this. March 2012, this might be a slight exaggeration, but all women love to talk about baby names. No, we don't. And it's not just when people have babies that she gets judgy about, it's also about whether those babies were planned or not. September 2012, oops babies. It seems there are a lot of oops babies out there. I know a bunch of people who said they only wanted to have 1 or 2 kids, or no kids, and then oops. It seems like everyone I know had an oops baby or knows someone who did. I question the concept of oops babies. I wasn't trying to get pregnant either time I did, but I know I wasn't trying hard not to. Yeah, mistimed natural family planning. One of my friends in residency got pregnant by accident twice, although one time it sounded like she wasn't using any protection. A friend of mine who got pregnant in high school wasn't the result of a broken condom, but no condom at all. I do know a woman who got pregnant on birth control pills, but I have to wonder if she was taking them correctly. I wonder how many genuine oops babies there are, or if they're really should have known better babies. It's so judgy. So I mean, right now I feel like 99% sure that I don't want any more children, and I certainly feel like the stress of another child would be unbearable right now. So I got a Mirena IUD. It's supposed to be greater than 99% effective and as effective as sterilization procedures. But the more stories I hear, the more I worry about an oops baby. I'll just say from personal experience, not everyone can have the Mirena. For me, it is simply too big for my uterus, and it was causing me constant daily pain, and oh my god, it was horrific. It was just like, because it was digging into the sides of my uterus constantly and causing constant cramping and pain. And it's just like, it was great for stopping my periods, horrible for having daily pain. Nightmare. It'll be great for some people, absolutely it will, and I absolutely advise people, like, give it a try. But if you have an abnormally small uterus like I do, and an abnormally small cervix, it might not be possible for you. Just gonna say that. Her judgment around people deciding not to have kids or waiting to have kids does seem to stem from her own mother's struggles with infertility, which Freida said she saw when she was growing up. And so I understand that her judgments come from a place of concern and worry, but these don't stop her comments from upsetting a lot of people, as we'll see in a moment when we read some of the replies to her posts. I'm also just going to take a break for a moment because I am struggling with my speech, so I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, I've had a little break, so let's get back to, this is from October 17th, 2010, my experience with infertility, which is actually about her mum's experience. Susan Sarandon had a child with Tim Robinson at age 46. You might ask why I know such a thing. Believe me, I'm not some kind of encyclopedia of what celebrities had kids at what age, but in 1992, when Susan Sarandon was 46 and gave birth to a son, my mother was 42 and trying to get pregnant for the last 3 years. I don't know if you've ever known someone having problems with infertility, or if you have, you may not have lived with them. It's pretty painful. When my mother found out Susan Sarandon was pregnant, she cried. Let me tell you, there are a lot of people in this world procreating, probably like millions. It's really difficult to shield your mother from all of them. We weren't even allowed to watch television shows involving fictional pregnancies or babies. It went on for years. Years of pregnancy tests, ovulation tests, fertility drugs, and mostly just lots of crying. And eventually, she really was too old, and then there was the trying to adopt era, which came with its own set of heartbreaks. I had my daughter when I was 27 and was probably the youngest of all my friends and colleagues to have a baby, although interestingly, that was still above the average age to have a first child in this country. But then again, that includes people living in huts in Wyoming, where I don't think that birth control has been invented yet. Kidding. In any case, I felt a little awkward at times having a baby so early. Some of my friends thought I was nuts, and now, almost 4 years later, some of them still haven't gotten started on their first. The thing is, when you've watched someone close to you go through the heartbreak of infertility month after month, it's really hard to wait for something you know you really want. I knew I had to be a mother, that my life would seem empty if I didn't get that experience, so how could I do anything to risk that not happening? And I did wait for quite a while. It's not like I got knocked up in high school. I made it through my entire intern year. That's why I feel a bit perplexed when I see my female friends waiting through all of med school, then all of residency, and even though they're married and in their early or even mid-30s, they still continue to wait. And the truth is, I'm sure they're all going to get pregnant. People seem to get pregnant pretty easily. But then again, what if you're the one person who can't and you didn't even start trying till age 35? I had a talk about this with an OBGYN attending, and she said that most of her female co-residents decided to wait until after residency to conceive, and some were less successful than others. That's why, despite the fact I'm only 31, and in many ways I like my life how it is, I feel compelled to start thinking about having a second baby sooner rather than later. My husband tells me I'm being silly, but if I know I want a second, then how could I risk not having it? No, this is my 100th post on Mothers in Medicine, definitely a sign I've got too much time on my hands. But some of the commenters were not happy with this post at all. One anonymous person says, although I appreciate your comments on fertility, I felt compelled to respond. I'm a 30-year-old female with 1 year and 8 months, who's counting, left of residency. My husband and I are both in residency training actually, and although I do think we want children in the future, we're not trying to get pregnant currently. Unfortunately, your unfairly written article helps contribute to the pressure that women in my position feel. As a woman in her 30s, I have had friends, family, and even patients give me the "you better hurry up and start a family" lecture. And as a doctor, I'm acutely aware that statistics are not in my favour as I gain years. However, I am a firm believer that you must be mentally ready to start a family and not just start trying because you feel time is running out. I like this commenter, they seem sensible. Your article, especially written by a female doctor of only 31, is not very woman-friendly. In addition, when you write things like, that's why I feel a bit perplexed when I see my female friends wait through all of med school, done all of residency, and even though they're married and in their early or even mid-30s, they still continue to wait, maybe you should take a minute to get to know these women before you make these kinds of statements. Why not talk to these friends of yours if you're so concerned? As successful and intelligent female doctors, we understand the risks of waiting to have children until we are ready. Although this may perplex you, not all of us are in the position to have children in medical school or residency. Finally, as a colleague, I would appreciate you thinking before judging me and female doctors that make tough decisions. I think this is a really fair comment, and I do agree with them. I think, yeah, great point. Freida, or Fizzy, as she was going by at the time, disagrees though. She says, Anon, I appreciate your point of view. I didn't say these things to judge anyone or be controversial, although I was fairly sure some people, especially those who are already feeling the pressure, would take it that way. I'm just trying to share the pressure that I personally felt to have a child early and why I felt that. Obviously, I know as well as anyone that having a baby is a huge deal, and sometimes I do wish I had waited. A lot of these times I feel jealous of my friends who waited. But I also know from experience that infertility is really, really heartbreaking and frustrating, and I was terrified of going through that myself. Ultimately, it's a risk you take when you wait. If you're comfortable taking that risk, then great. I wasn't, and I wanted to explain why. Freida really does have a habit of arguing back and forth with people who disagree with her. We'll touch more on this later, but it's something you'll notice. Another commenter called Lindsay said, it's just a set of facts and judgment. Chances of infertility and complications go up. With age, you have to judge that against your financial position and personal and relationship situation, against how important having a child or children is to you, and make a decision based on those factors. Yep, on board there. Another commenter who goes by OMDG said, what's perplexing to me is why this is so hard for you to fathom, Fizzy. Not every woman lives her life waiting for the day when she can finally be a mother. You're entitled to your set of priorities, other women are entitled to theirs. And Freida responded with, some people seem to be having trouble with the word perplexed, so why don't we say curious instead? I do, of course, understand the decision to wait on some level, because I've been waiting on number 2. Most people have their kids 2 to 3 years apart, and I've waited longer, around 4 years. I'm sure that many people are perplexed as to why I've waited longer, and I'm okay with that. I'm comfortable with my decision and the risk I'm taking. I have lots of friends who don't want kids at all, and that's pretty understandable. Funny she says that, because another post she gets really judgy about them. I guess I'm more curious about friends who are 35 plus and definitely want kids, but are still waiting. It seems like a big risk, but then again, I'm extremely risk adverse in general. I hate to gamble. Once again, I didn't intend this as a judgment post, although I'm not surprised or disappointed it sparked some controversy. My mother's infertility was a primary theme during at least a third of my childhood. I was sharing a meaningful story that influenced my later choices. I was trying to be honest and share my feelings. Waiting to conceive is a risk, that is a fact. I was trying to explain why I didn't take that risk. However, another anonymous commenter accused her of being anti-woman and said, anti-woman can be characterized when a professional, intelligent female doctor says, and now, almost 4 years later, some of them still haven't gotten started on their first, in reference to her friends being age 31, not getting started having children. Or when the author writes, that's why I feel a bit perplexed when I see my female friends wait in, blah, 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 blah. We've read that quote. If you can't understand why that's not anti-woman, I cannot help you. Freida left a long response to this. After having a night to sleep on it, I feel even more certain that my post is not judgmental in the slightest. You're still in training, so the perplexed statement doesn't apply to you. But yes, I meant that statement. If you're 35, done with training, married, know you want kids, then what are you waiting for? Just because you're a physician, does that mean your biological clock has different rules? Is stating the biological facts of female fertility anti-woman? If so, you should send some hate mail to this site and the thousands of others like it. And it's a website called advancedfertility.com. Anon, I truly hope that when you're ready to conceive, you are successful. The people who are telling you not to wait, though, aren't doing it because they're mean or hateful. They're simply worried about biological facts and that you'll be heartbroken if you take a risk and fail. I'm not saying that a 20-year-old should go out and get pregnant. I'm not saying people who don't want kids need to have them. That's not what she says in other posts. Or that people who aren't sure need to have them, but fertility falls off after age 30 and much more so after age 35. If you're 31 and want 2 to 3 kids, you're taking a risk by not trying now. I think you need to analyze your choices, Anon, and try to figure out why a relatively innocent and personal post made you so enraged. Look at some of my main points. My husband thinks I'm nuts. I got pregnant earlier than any of my friends and felt awkward about it. I had a trauma early in my childhood, and everyone gets pregnant. I said repeatedly that it was my choice. If I was judgmental of anyone, it was myself, but you somehow took it as a personal attack. I'd love to hear from a female physician who struggled with fertility, a guest post, and maybe they can give their thoughts on whether they think waiting into your late 30s is a good idea. And thanks a lot, because now you've made me sound like my mother. In another comment, she says, of course, I knew this post would generate a lot of comments. I was purposely saving it for my 100th post to make a big bang. I really do apologize if anyone was hurt by the post, because that wasn't my intention, and yes, I do understand why. Having babies is emotional, and waiting to have babies is emotional, and infertility is emotional. That is part of my point. I know women in their 30s hear this from their friends, family, colleagues, etc., and it gets to the point that anytime they hear it, they want to punch the person who says it. I've gotten some of that same pressure on number 2, especially from my mother, so believe me, I understand. But on the other hand, this is a story that was incredibly meaningful to me. I wasn't going to not share it because someone might get offended. If I'm going to work that way, I might as well stop blogging altogether. Speaking of judgmental, there is absolutely nobody worse than internet mummies. If you don't have your crib facing like east, you're called a Nazi and an unfit mother. Okay. Obviously, it's a woman's choice whether to reproduce and when. I'm not making that choice for anyone. I thought people might be interested to hear why I made the specific decision I did, because I often felt like nobody understood. I do worry about infertility more than most women because of my family history, and it also makes me realize that reproductive technology isn't foolproof. I didn't want to miss my window because it goes past. Another person who is anonymous, and I think, this is a pretty fair thing, said, I'm just picking up this post now, quite the responses. Fizzy, I can understand the points you were trying to make, but you just need to reread your original post. Your comments come across as judgmental. Just saying. She replied to this saying, I think people who are older and have not gotten started on baby making are all reading this post as judgmental, mostly because they hear comments about you better not wait all the time and are sick of it. But I was trying to do a be honest. Oh, but I completely misread that. But all I was trying to do was be honest and explain my real thought process. And I think I presented most sides. If you reread it. See what I mean? Like, this commenter was on her side. They were trying to help her. And she's like, well, if you reread it. See what I mean about how she's not the most likable, even when she is making good points. Blah blah blah, these are not judgments but rather worries I have. This was my stream of consciousness. I think I presented both sides, but nobody wants to hear both sides. They only want to hear their own side. I know. Following this, she decided that she had so much to say on the topic that she wanted to make a part 2 in which she got her mother to share her story herself, and again there were quite a lot of angry comments. So this was my experience with infertility part 2. I felt like my first post hadn't peed everyone off sufficiently, so I've decided to take things a step further. I mentioned this internet discussion to my mother, who is not just a mother in medicine, but also a mother of a mother in medicine, and she wanted to share her story. With Casey's permission, who runs the blog, posting what she wrote to me below. Get ready to flame, because the people who didn't like the first post are gonna hate this one. So I kind of feel like Freida likes being controversial. She likes getting people angry, and then she likes arguing with them in the comments. You'll see when we get to the end of this video, there's posts about how sometimes like she does it on purpose to get people riled up. Anyway, this is her mother's story. This is fine. We don't have to go into it all. But one of the things her mum said was, I don't have confidence in fertility treatments. And one commenter called Kelly picked up on this and said, that is quite a statement. Things have changed so much since your mum's treatment. Pergonal is not used, which is what her mum had. There are also better treatments for causes of infertility. I have the greatest confidence because I know I would not have my wonderful 4-year-old without the medical intervention. And I think that's a big thing to think about. Freida was writing this back in 2010. And again, it's 16 years ago. Things have improved greatly since then as well. So like in the 30 years since her mum was struggling, in the 16 years since the blog post went on, so it's like 46, 45 years since her mum was struggling with infertility. I feel like fertility treatment's in the same way because we have had so many advances. So that's something worth thinking about. Freida replied to Kelly here, though, being pretty sensible, saying, I'm glad things worked out for you, but it doesn't for everyone, even these days. Unfortunately, I have friends who have recently failed some of the modern fertility treatments in the last few years. It's much better than it was, but there are still limits to what medical science can accomplish. Another anonymous poster said, I'm anon number 1 from your first post. I truly feel sorry for you. To be a better person, you must be able to look at your writing and opinions critically. The story in this post is not judgmental, nor is it written in a judgmental way. Your post, however, had some questionable statements. My original point is that you must be supportive of all women, whether you meant it or not. Your comments did not come across as supportive. Instead of listening to a thoughtful response, though, you became very defensive, and many of your statements after my post continued along the same line. Finally, in your introduction of the new writer, you emphasized the word hate, and you even chose to write that word in capital letters. Is this really the word you wanted to say loudest? As a colleague, I would ask that in future you really try to listen to others' opinions before becoming defensive. Also, try to start from a place of mutual respect rather than hate when you begin posts. Respectfully, Anon. Freida? Oh, she got so like sassy in her response. Anon number 1. I should remind you that you were the one who immediately and insultingly dubbed my post as anti-woman and didn't even have the courtesy to use any sort of real identity for yourself so that I could properly reply. See, she loves arguing, she loves it. I don't think one person agreed with you that the post was anti-woman. There's no point in my explaining to you why, because you don't actually seem to be listening to anything I say, and you were the only person, even of the ones who disagreed, who was actually reading your reply. I'm sorry you're so insecure about the future that you feel the need to take it out on me. If you were truly happy with the choices you were making, you wouldn't feel a need to attack me repeatedly. You would simply shrug and let it go. Every time you reply in anger just reaffirms your insecurity. This has nothing to do with me or my post, but about your own fears. You need to learn to be comfortable with your own choices and stop being so damn oversensitive. She sounds like me arguing with people when I was like 21, you know? So all that happened around her 100th post anniversary. That's really hard to say. But she also tried to stir up a bunch of controversy for her 50th post anniversary as well, back in 2009, where she admitted her reason for blogging at all was this. So June 2009. Oh my god, that means she wrote 50 posts in like a year. Ugh, anyway, she writes a lot. When I realised that this would be my 50th post on this blog, I decided I wanted to make it good. Not my usual crap, right? I asked around for advice and got some suggestions that were good, probably topics for future posts, but didn't quite have the wow factor I wanted. I wanted to make a post that was not just interesting, but shocking. See, she loves the drama, loves it. So here goes. When I joined this blog back in its infancy 1 year ago, I had an ulterior motive. The truth was that I felt that going into medicine was a huge mistake for any woman who wanted to become a mother, and I was determined to share that opinion. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot. Being like, if you ever want to be a mum, don't do this entire huge range of careers. Like, that's a lot. Thankfully, though, however, it seems like she's changed her mind over the years and through blogging. She ended up saying, anyone who's read some of my earlier posts would know I came dangerously close to blurting out that opinion on several occasions, but I always just barely stopped short and ended with some cheesy phrase like, but it's all worth it. I didn't say what I truly felt because I was scared. I knew this opinion would not be popular. Nobody wants to hear that a woman shouldn't follow her career aspirations just because she wants to have a family. Yeah, there's good reason no one wants to hear that. And moreover, I was embarrassed to admit that after 7 grueling years of training and hundreds of thousands of dollars in tuition, I had major regrets, but I felt that it was important and needed to be said. Maybe that's why I've written so much. I'm like the guy who buys 20 unneeded items at the newsstand, hoping the one issue of Playboy goes unnoticed. A year later, I still haven't made a definitive post warning mothers-to-be not going to medicine, but not because I'm a chicken anymore, it's because reading these entries over the course of the last year has actually changed my mind. We love to see someone grow and change. This is brilliant. Hearing about all these female physicians, both the bloggers and the commenters, who love being mothers in medicine has inspired me. I'm changed. If you guys love it, then I'm optimistic that I can too. Maybe I'm just giddy about my graduating residency, but I no longer feel that a dire need to tell young female pre-meds to run before it's too late. So I guess for my 50th post, I'd like to say thanks. Thanks to everyone who posted or commented about how being a physician mama is a gift that only a few of us get to experience. I needed that, which sounds great. We love that. However, as time went on and I read more and more of her posts, I began to realise that maybe she hadn't actually changed her mind at all, because she still seemed to hate her job. She hated being a doctor, and she was still writing posts about how if you want to be a mother, you need to do the mother thing first and the doctor thing second. Or for some women, she was just flat out saying, don't become a doctor because, well, in one case, she says certain women are too pretty to be doctors, but we'll get to that. It's wild. Here was, where are we up to? Let's take a look at a few posts as examples of her like pushing motherhood on people before career and so on. So this was March 2012, why you absolutely need to have a baby in residency. She says, I was going to write a post going through several domains and decide which was easier, doing it, meaning having a baby as an attending, or doing it as a residency, or like, during residency. But I'll save some time for both of us. Attending wins all round. To the point where I got mad at myself for not having waited the first time round. Of course, everything's easier the second time round because you know what to expect, and I happen to have an easier second child than the first, and a flexible job. That said, I think having a baby during residency was a good experience in many ways, and I obviously do not regret it. So in the interest of being positive, I present to you reasons to have a kid during residency instead of waiting. 1, because apparently it isn't so great to have kids after age 40, and blah blah blah. She goes on to talk about how awful it is to have a kid when you're older, if you can. 2, it's unlikely when you get out in the real world you will have like 20 people to share coverage for your leave. Coverage is much harder to come by in the real world, and blah blah blah. So once again, she's talking about why you need to have a kid as early as possible, blah blah blah. Nothing really changed there, did it? There's more. 4, everyone talks about the getting the career stuff out the way before having kids because you want to enjoy your kids. But how about enjoying your career? The second you get out in the real world and start building your career, do you really want it broken up by maternity leave and sleepless nights? So she says, do the kids first, do the job second. 6, it helps you grow up and gain maturity and perspective, which let's face it, a lot of residents really need. Yeah, because a person couldn't possibly be mature or have perspective or be responsible without being a parent, right? 8, being a parent gives you a way to relate to attendings, and while some of them might give you smack for taking maternity leave, I felt like I got more respect for being a mum. And 9, because what else are you going to put a picture of at the end of your PowerPoint lecture? Your cat? Am I crazy for thinking like don't include your family in a work presentation? I don't know, I'm confused by that one. That's really bizarre. And she just kept going with these types of posts for years. Here's another. Again, September 2012, having kids young. More and more, it seems like women are waiting until their 30s or even their late 30s to have children. In medicine, I think it's a function of trying to get difficult training out the way first, which I can certainly understand. There are times when I question my own decision to have kids so young, but ultimately I think it was a good decision. I've written here before about how I think career advancement can always be postponed, but having kids is one thing that's time sensitive for women. Here's why I'm glad I had kids young. 1, pregnancy was much easier in my 20s than my 30s. The difference was actually surprising, and my glucose numbers were even worse the second time. I had 0 complications for my first pregnancy, and since I was so young, I didn't have to go through any invasive testing like amniocentesis. 2, caring for a newborn was easier in my 20s than my 30s. My body was more, which is funny because earlier she was saying the second pregnancy was easier, but okay. My body was much more amenable to it when I was younger, and I had far fewer aches and pains. 3, presumably I'll continue to have more energy to do stuff with my kids throughout my 30s compared with parents in their 40s. I've heard a lot of older dads complain about this. 4, my parents are younger and have more energy to help than they would if I'd waited until they were in their late 60s to have kids. And similarly, I'll have a greater chance of being a young grandma who can help with and appreciate my own grandchildren. Fingers crossed. 5, I never had to go through the pains of trying to conceive while all my friends were having babies and posting photos of them on Facebook. If I did have trouble trying to conceive at 27, I would have had more time to work on it. What are we on? 6, something like that. Arranging cover was amazingly less burdensome as a resident than it was as an attending. Hang on, that's my dishwasher. 7, at this point, since I feel done with childbearing, IUD willing, I can expand my career and take on new obligations without worrying about another pregnancy and kids interrupting. And finally, kids are awesome. I'm going to disagree with that one, but that's just a personal opinion. Of course, I'm sure there's a similar list of benefits to having kids at age 40. And it's not just that she's trying to convince you that her way is the right way, it's that any other way in her opinion is wrong. Take this post from just a few months later in December 2012, titled Older Parenthood, Upending American Society. I was at a meeting recently with several female physicians and young therapists. We were discussing a patient who was 45 years old and had a 6-year-old son. One of the therapists commented, "So that means she was 39 when she had a baby? That's so old." Crickets chirped. Almost every physician in that room had had children at 39 or older. Same with my mum, actually. She was a month off 38 when I was born, so yeah. On Facebook this morning, one of my friends posted an article about how families are having children at older ages and the consequences of this decision. In case you don't read the article, these are its main points. 1, the chances of learning disabilities as well as certain other problems such as schizophrenia and autism increase several-fold in older parents. I don't know if the autism thing has been proven there, or the schizophrenia thing. I know there's a higher chance of Down syndrome if the father is older, but I would like a proper source for this, please. 2, women who have their first child at an older age are less likely to have the number of children they wanted 10 years earlier. People's needs and wants also change over the period of 10 years, so there's that. 3, reproduction becomes more difficult and costly as you age, unless you're in a country with nationalised healthcare like the UK, in which case it's not more costly at all because it's still free. Having children at an older age means having older grandparents for your kids. I don't see why that's a bad thing. Having children at an older age means dying when your kids are younger, or at least being more infirm for most of their adulthood. At the same time, the article also cites children of older parents grow up in wealthier households, lead more stable lives, and do better in school. It's funny how she's very much like, I'm just trying to show both sides. But she's like, here's a whole article about my side of things and a line about the opposite side. Ultimately, it's a very personal decision, but I know when it comes to motherhood, we're all racked with guilt about our decisions, and one of the earliest decisions you have as a mother is when to have babies. Like, I get her point, and this isn't like the worst thing she's ever said or done, I'll say that, but I feel like she's being a bit patronising, because you know that if women are choosing to wait, this is already stuff that they've already thought about and weighed up. You know what I mean? The later someone goes into motherhood and pregnancy, the more they've likely thought about it and weighed up certain pros and cons, you know? Yeah, these sentiments come up in other posts too. So for example, September 2011, the best career for a mother. I recently read a blog post about whether medicine is a good career for a woman since you can work part-time to be with your kids and many specialties are very family friendly. I wasn't thinking about kids when I was 21 and applying to med school, but I was told medicine was a good career for a woman because it's a field where a woman can earn a good living and face less discrimination than in some math-oriented fields I was considering. As for being a mother in medicine, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would have said that being in medicine is a horrible idea if you want to be a mother. Now I revise my opinion and say that it's only a horrible idea if you want to be a mother before you turn 30. But it's still not ideal in that you can't reschedule a roster of patients because your kid has a fever, and squeezing in a pumping session can be difficult during a doctor's typically busy day. And following on from this, I just want to talk about her complaints about child-free people. There's quite a few posts on this, but I picked out just a couple. This was July 2008, called Child-Free. I've written about the decision of female physicians to have a child early in their career versus late in their career, but there's a third option I've noticed more and more female physicians seem to be choosing. No kids. In my residency program, many of the female attendings have chosen to be child-free. When I asked them why, they gave the following reasons. I wanted to be able to retire early. I thought I could either be a good doctor or a good mother, but not both, so I chose to be a good doctor. Kids are too much responsibility. I'd rather be a godparent or an aunt. I don't like kids much. I didn't want to ruin my life. And I think that all sounds absolutely reasonable, right? No, not to Freida. A lot of these people seem enamoured with the concept of DINK. DINK is an acronym that stands for Double Income No Kids. As another resident recently remarked to me, a pair of DINK physicians have really made it. They can have a huge expensive house, they could spend their afternoon playing golf, their weekends at the spa, and their nights bathing in gold amulets. I guess I don't really know what rich people do in their leisure time. They could retire at 50. Of course, I've always wanted kids, so I see things differently. I don't see the point of a big house if I'm not going to fill it up with kids. The reason I want money is so that I have it to spend on my kids. And what will I do after retirement if I don't have grandchildren to play with? So it just feels a bit judgy. She just feels like she's like forcing this idea of everyone should have kids onto everyone else, and it just bothers me a bit. Like I'm sorry that you don't enjoy your own company or want to do anything for yourself, but not everyone is like that. Some of us like our alone time without kids. The idea of filling a house with kids horrifies me. The idea of having to play with kids during my retirement is also horrifying. I want to be like one of those old ladies who sits around and like paints all day and reads books and plays board games and has a bunch of old lady friends to gossip with, you know? That's what I want. I don't want kids messing that up. But that's just me. Freida goes on more too. In December 2013, she wrote Reasons Not to Have Kids. One day in residency, I was having lunch with 3 people who did not have children, 2 of whom were female attendings who were in their 50s, so it's safe to say their childbearing years are over. Third was a male resident who had definitively decided not to have kids, although later actually did. The conversation was basically about how horrible having children is and how it ruins your life and wrecks your marriage. I was not participating in this end of the conversation because I didn't agree. One of the attendings involved in this conversation was Dr. Blabber, the most notoriously horrible attending that our hospital ever had, so nicknamed for the painfully long and irrelevant conversations she had with every patient, especially on weekend rounds. She was universally thought of as incompetent, slow, and dumb by other attendings, therapists, and nursing staff. She was so awful that even though she was a terrible teacher, the powers that be were afraid to take her resident away because they thought she would kill someone if she were alone. Freida's really nasty about other women sometimes, like, quite often. Like, horrible. It's not the only time you'll see this. So this is what she said. I made the decision not to have kids because I didn't think I would be able to have children and also be able to do my job really well. I thought that was absolutely hilarious. This was what she called doing her job really well. She should have just had the kids. See, she's just unnecessarily cruel. Like, this is why I find it really hard to find her likable. You know? Nasty. Really nasty. She goes on. The best moment was when the resident asked me how having a baby had affected my marriage. I was about to answer something along the lines of, in some ways we're closer, but some things are more difficult because we don't get to spend as much time with just the 2 of us. But before I could say this, Dr. Blabber broke in. There is no marriage. It's just about the baby. Thanks for your input on my life, Dr. B. Actually, she's someone who seemed really like she should have had kids. She's got a kind of matronly quality and she loves telling people what to do in a very patronizing tone. So it just seems like Freida's a bit of a mean girl sometimes, especially when it comes to people with no kids. There's more too, though. August 2013, no kids. This is an article I posted on Facebook that generated a lot of discussion, so I'm posting here. The article was titled, I'm Coming Out, I Don't Want Children. The article talks about how she feels a kinship to the LGBT community due to her decision not to have kids. The article irritated me on a few levels. 1. Comparing the plight of gay people to a couple who doesn't want to have kids is pretty insulting to the LGBT community and what they go through. Even just calling it a choice shows how different it is. I make tons of choices that have been subject to criticism, for example, choosing to work as a mum, but that doesn't mean I know what it's like to be persecuted for my sexual preferences. And 2, you're 27, write this article in another 15 years, because I think every single one of my friends in their 20s who strongly didn't want kids has somehow changed their mind. So there's a lot to unpack there. I did actually go and read that article, by the way. So in regards to the first point, the author of the article simply said, I relate to my LGBT brothers and sisters as I also struggle for others' acceptance. And that's about it. That's as far as it goes. She says she relates because she struggles for others' acceptance. She wasn't like diminishing what they go through, nothing like that. She was just saying we both struggle to be accepted by people. She went on to say, as time goes on, I will start to become more and more isolated from my peer group as my secret comes out because I don't want children. First, this might seem like a minor comment. However, it's a choice that I feel has alienated me from my peers and will continue to do so as I creep towards middle age. The realization that I am somehow different is how I found myself standing up for my own personal beliefs and along the way, championing equal rights for all. Although I know I do not share the same predicament as gays and lesbians, I use the comparison to explain that I too am seeking acceptance in a world in which I often feel ostracized and out of place. And I get it, and I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that comparison. And to me, like, the decision not to have kids is not like a choice as such. It's just an inherent part of who I am. I'm not a mother. I'm not motherly. I don't have those motherly maternal feelings towards kids or babies. So to me, that's not a choice, you know? in the same way that like my sexuality is not a choice. It just is what it is, you know? But it's interesting as well because, like, again, I do see comparisons because while, like, when I talk about my, like, desire to not want kids and stuff, I always get people saying the same things that get said to a lot of gay people. You just need to find the right man. It's just a phase. You'll grow out of it. Blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like, there are very similar responses. So I understand this author making the comparison. And I know I'm just one individual, and like, I can't sit here and speak for the entire queer community, but I'm just saying I don't find it that disrespectful, the comparison, you know? And I kind of find it funny that Freida, who is a self-proclaimed straight woman, who goes on and on about how straight she is in a lot of her posts, is more than happy to try and speak for all queer people. It's interesting. Her second point annoyed me as well, the you're 27, wait another 15 years thing, because Freida had her first kid at 27. What if I turned around to her and said, oh love, you're only 27, wait another 15 years to have kids because you might change your mind? She would be so angry at that. Does she not understand that, like, this is also disrespectful? Again, it bothers me. It's like she's literally doing the whole it's just a phase, she'll grow out of it thing. Like, anyway. Freida also makes a lot of posts about how difficult it is to be a parent and how child-free people could never possibly understand that. So, for example, August 2008, last night we went out for dinner with a friend of my husband, as well as his girlfriend. Both members of this couple were graduate students and didn't have any kids yet. If you were to construct a responsibility scale to rate the obligations of the various people have in their lives, I would say that being a medical resident with children will fall on the higher end, and being a childless grad student would fall on the low end. The very, very low end, like 0. Another one is November 2012, holiday privileges. Here's a question for the ages. Should employees with children be given preference in terms of not having to work the holidays? I say yes. You will notice that complaining about stuff is one of Freida's favourite hobbies, and you'll notice that when she's not complaining about being a parent, but also telling everyone that they should totally 100% definitely be a parent, she's complaining about being a doctor. This next bunch of posts and stuff are about Freida's hatred of her job, but first we need to figure out what her job actually is. November 2008, she says, I work in a field called physical medicine and rehabilitation, which means that I'm pretty much constantly explaining what I do. Basically, we deal with sport and other musculoskeletal injuries, as well as the subacute medical management of patients with neurological injuries, including brain and spinal cord injury. It's supposedly a lifestyle specialty, which is illustrated by the joke that PM and R stands for plenty of money and relaxation. Of course, it's not all money and relaxation, especially during residency, but considering I had no in-house call even during my first year after internship, I can't complain too much. Lifestyle specialties are usually popular among all applying med students, not just women who want to have kids. That or skin is just super interesting. It's definitely a lot easier to have children if you're in a specialty where the hours are manageable, and I won't lie and say that lifestyle wasn't a significant part of my decision. When describing some specifics about her job, she made this post. Blah blah blah, here's a list of some of the cool stuff we get to do. EMGs, fluoroscopic injections for pain, Botox/phenol blocks, musculoskeletal ultrasound, steroid injections, blah blah blah. You get the idea. It's fine. This is about her job. She's also written a lot about her career path in general. At one point, she nearly went into research. So July 2009, she says, apparently after residency, it's all about the connections and I had just the right one. Woo! I get to continue being an impoverished trainee. A large component of my fellowship is supposed to be flexible research time. This really appeals to me, not because I intend to spend this time taking my daughter to the park, but because I love doing research. Many eons ago during college, I participated in quite a few serious research projects, but the mice in the lab weren't my bag. I love proposing a project, collecting data, analysing data, writing the paper, and especially seeing the article in print, but I hated to sit in a lab with test tubes and/or rodents, and PCR. So the idea of doing clinical research really appeals to me. People all tell me I seem like an academic, and it's in my blood, i.e. both my parents. I also think that it's ideal work for a mother in medicine due to flexibility. I never want to give up seeing patients or lose my clinical skills, but I think I'd lose my mind in seeing patients full time. Research grants seem like a nice way to add to your income while not working yourself into the ground. Also, you have the opportunity to contribute something to your field as a whole. However, just 9 months later, we instead get told, May 2010, why not research? She says that she started off talking a little bit about her early career, and then years later I found myself in a research fellowship, which was just 9 months before this post, finally putting my money where my mouth was. I applied for an award that would have paid my salary for several years and launched me into a career in research. I convinced myself that research was what I wanted to do, that it would be great for my resume, and that it would allow me flexibility in my life more than a clinical career. It also seemed like research was a good career for a mother. It actually surprises me that so few women do it. Unfortunately, my application for the award was promptly rejected. Too many applicants, blah blah blah. I'm not used to academic rejection and it felt awful. As I read the email in disbelief, I decided that I couldn't live my life this way. I would not apply for future research awards. I would be a clinician, not a researcher. How much can change in 9 months? She says, because I like to make lists, these are the reasons I ultimately decided research was not for me. 1, I don't like the feeling of being rejected, which I'm told is something you have to get used to in research and love. 2, although few jobs are permanent, living from grant to grant is nerve-wracking, I've heard. 3, due to the economy, I've seen a lot of research departments getting served with major cutbacks. This might be a bad time to start being a researcher. 4, I do think a job in research lends flexibility, but it also results in a workday that never ends. Blah blah blah. I'm mistreating patients for the sake of making them better, rather than eyeing them as research subjects. 6, I personally don't get excited about research, even though before she was going on about how much she loved it. Interesting. So it's wild how quickly her perspective can change with just one simple rejection. But anyway, here's another similar example. So Freida often talks about how she didn't have good enough grades to go into some of the more competitive fields in medicine like dermatology, but then she tries to convince us that it was also totally her choice not going to dermatology because, well, her reasons seem mean. So in one of her earlier blog posts, she went on about how she didn't have good enough grades for dermatology, but then in this one, in June 2012, she says, I mentioned on this blog before that I had good grades and scores in med school, although not freaking awesome. So it seems like the reason I didn't do dermatology should be obvious. I wasn't freaking awesome, and that's what you need to be to match in derm these days. Between you and me, I actually did have a possible opportunity to do derm. My cousin is a big cheese dermatologist and assured me multiple times that he'd get me a residency spot if I wanted it. I don't know if this was a true offer, but needless to say, I didn't take him up on it. It was tempting for sure. Dermatologists make good money and have a great lifestyle. I like procedures and dermatologists get to do lots of those. Part of the reason I didn't try was because of location, but there were some other reasons. I looked at the people in my class who matched in derm and thought about those people being my colleagues for the rest of my life, and I felt ill. It's just mean, isn't it? Really, really mean. She also writes a lot of posts which tell us why she hates her job so much. So for example, May 2011, Weekly Wine, Intellectual Curiosity. I think I've lost my intellectual curiosity. I think it's been gone a while, like years, maybe more than a decade. The first time I suspected I'd lost my intellectual curiosity was during my intern year. She then goes on to tell a story of treating a patient with a really unusual diagnosis that excited all of her colleagues because they were like, oh my god, we've never seen this before, we get to treat this is groundbreaking. And she said, aside from the fact that the woman clearly had some sort of somatization disorder and not freaking brucellosis, I'm terrible at reading medical words, I'm so sorry. It occurred to me that I was totally and completely unexcited by the idea that she might have brucellosis or some other rare entity. I honestly couldn't have cared less, but I had to fake caring. I kept commenting, wow, that was such an interesting case. I hope it wasn't too obvious that I was completely full of crap. For a brief time in residency, I thought I regained my intellectual curiosity, but I think I might have just been kidding myself. And now, well, I get irritated when people want to work up a chronic medical conditions on my short stay in patients. Recently, I had a patient, blah, 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 and neurology was talking about how it was so interesting and wondering what was causing it, while the truth was, I couldn't care less. It's kind of sad that I lost my intellectual curiosity though. It's one of those things that keeps you from being unhappy as a physician. So she's clearly miserable. She's really, really miserable in this job. Here's another example. December 2011, thinking big. There's a young physician named Dr. Thompson who works at my hospital. A few days ago, I heard some of the staff members talking about Dr. Thompson. Someday I'm going to turn on the TV and Dr. Thompson will be talking about something important and I'll be like, I know that guy. On the one hand, I was a little insulted that nobody would say that about me. On the other hand, I agree. He's smart and has ambition. While I'm thinking, how can I help a patient? Dr. Thompson is also always thinking, how can I help the hospital? How can I help my field? How can I help the planet? I could never think as big as he does. Mostly I'm just trying to get through the day. I wonder, is it because I'm a woman with kids? Does that take the fight out of me? Is it possible to be a mother of young children and also think big? Recently, I saw a list of all the female world leaders. There are currently 20 female presidents and prime ministers, which is a record number, and half of the 10 most populous countries in the world have female leaders. These are all women, many of them mothers, who clearly think big. It was sort of inspiring to see that list. I guess it means I have no excuse. So as much as Freida likes to use her I'm a doctor as a credential these days, I don't think she ever felt passionate about it. I don't think she actually ever really enjoyed it or wanted to do it, which is quite sad. And it's also sad that she thinks women with kids can't think big or have passions outside of being a mother to these kids. I think it does a disservice to women in general to think that way, doesn't it? This brings us nicely onto the section about Freida hating being a doctor and trying to convince others, especially women, especially good-looking women, that they shouldn't work in medicine. So first up, in 2008, she wrote, "Mothers, don't let your daughters be doctors." People ask me if I plan to encourage my daughter to become a doctor. At this point, I'd settle for her not colouring all over the walls, but my specific answer to that question is absolutely not. In fact, not only will I not encourage her to become a doctor, but I will actively discourage her from entering a life in medicine. I will tell her every awful story I can think of about the abuse med students, residents, and I can only presume attendings are put through. I'll complain incessantly about how being a doctor means giving up your life to your patients. I mean, yes, I'll buy her the toy doctor's kit, but that will mostly be for me to play with. But she did end it with, and this is a little bit better, "And after all that, if she still wants to be a doctor, I can't say I'll be disappointed. What mum doesn't want their daughter to follow in their footsteps? But it's important to me that she gets to that decision on her own, because medicine is not a career anyone should be pushed into." Which is not so bad. That last bit is completely reasonable, until you read everything else she's written ever. For example, November 2008, "Pretty girls don't need to be doctors," and that title alone got me angry, and the post is even worse. On my last rotation, I was sharing an office with a former beauty pageant winner. She was gorgeous, and you can imagine how terribly attractive this made me feel. What with my wrinkled white coat, my shirt stained with baby food that didn't come out in the wash, and shoes that are probably similar to the ones your grandma wears. But she was such a nice girl. It was hard to feel too badly about it. Anyway, Miss Beauty Queen was interested in going to med school. Of course, over the rotation, I did my damnedest to talk her out of it. Every single day I told her a different true story, some titled "Med School Sucks," others titled "Being a Doctor Sucks," most under the general heading of "I'm really tired." Some of those stories were lifted right off this blog. Also, she would be a little older than the traditional students, and I reminded her that, "Oh my god, your biological clock is ticking. Babies." She was very surprised by some of the things I told her. She said that most people were really encouraging when she told them she was thinking of going to med school, especially when she told them she had doubts about it. I was surprised by that because I thought all doctors were bitter. Whenever I meet a pre-med, as a rule, I always try and talk them out of going to med school. It's not so much that I think nobody should go to med school. Clearly there are people who are born doctors and love it, and if nobody went to med school, I'm pretty sure everyone would end up getting diagnosed and treated by Dr. Wikipedia. So I'm not against med school, but I figure if there's something that I can say that is enough to talk a person out of going to med school, they're probably better off changing career paths now than when they have negative $200,000 in their bank account, because medical training is damn hard and most people just don't understand that. I mean, really understand that until they're in too deep. I feel like if I can keep even one person from making a mistake, it's worth it. On the last day of the rotation, Miss Beauty Queen told me she was going to business school. Freida understandably got backlash from this again in her comments. One person says, "I'm not trying to criticize or anything, but maybe she would have made a great doctor. I think you should have let her make her own decision instead of telling her all the bad things about medical school." Another person said, "And she's a woman, not a girl. A woman. Don't infantilize other women. It's about power and it's sexist and nasty." I agree with that. Which of course Freida responded to the anonymous commenter. "I was being facetious when I called her a pretty girl, although I'm glad there's some passion about a topic that isn't political." Not sure Freida knows what facetious means, as she was actually just being demeaning, but never mind. This person, HMS, said, "Don't know if it's a good idea to talk her out of it, but as long as you stay factual about what you say, namely your experience, it's her decision either way. Forecast has it that we'll be desperately short of smart, yet people-friendly healthcare professionals in the near future. Freida said there may be a shortage of doctors, but there will never be a shortage of desperate pre-meds who want to be doctors. Spots get wasted when people make the wrong decision and either drop out of med school or never practice, or become bad doctors because they hate it so much." The irony? Not calling Freida a bad doctor, just, she clearly hates it. Interesting. "I would rather have a doctor who had a slightly lower MCAT score, who really loves what she does and cares about her patients deeply." Yeah, but for all you know, this woman could have loved it and you just put her off it. Anyway. Another anonymous person said, "You seriously discouraged this young woman from following her ambition because she was pretty and because you think she should go have babies? For real?" OMDG says, as a pretty girl and slightly older than your traditional med student person, I was pretty offended by your characterization of this person. My impression of iBanking was that it was a lot less mummy friendly than medicine anyway, and last I heard, hysterectomy wasn't a requirement for admission to med school. Good point. I suppose you'll say, well, she chose something else, so she must not have been serious about it, so I was right to tell her these things. Still, this post left a really bad taste in my mouth. Maybe it was how you referred to her as a beauty queen? Could you have shown any more content for her? If she looked like a rhinoceros, would you have assumed she had no chance at landing a man and told her to go for it? I'm really disappointed by this post. There are good reasons not to go to med school, but your reason for discouraging this woman was way off the mark. And this person also said, I guess what bothers me is that your advice to her has more to do with your own issues than anything to do with her. Another anonymous commenter said, I'm a beauty queen and I became a surgeon. Stop stereotyping people due to how they look. She could have been a great doctor. Actually, the other day, a resident was being gossiped about and they said she was not pretty enough to be in his operating room. How times change. A commenter called CF said, sounds like someone is a little jealous. The first thing you said was that she practically made you feel ugly. She may be beautiful, a great doctor, and have kids one day. You let your jealousy get the best of you and in turn made someone turn on their dreams. Maybe you should reconsider what you're doing with your life and make changes to be happier. Give someone who actually wants the position, and let someone who actually wants the position have it, whether she's pretty or not. I did modelling and acted for 3 years in Los Angeles, and now I start medical school in a year. Joe replied simply, how pathetic to alter someone's dreams. And I kind of agree with a lot of the commenters here. I think they're in the right and they have some good points. There's more posts as well about Freida discouraging people. November 2008. If I were a first-year med student right now, I would. As a third-year med student, I was involved in some sort of group discussion session with first-year med students. All of us older, wiser third years were offering advice to the first years in the form of, if I were a first-year med student right now, I would. I just finished a particularly grueling internal medicine rotation, and I was feeling fairly disenchanted. When it came to my turn, I said, if I were a first-year med student right now, I would quit. Everyone kind of stared at me in shocked, awkward silence, and then quickly went on to the next person. It's quite revealing, isn't it? Then, just a little while later, she told us, there's a reason they call them fellows. This is going to be a bit of a rant, so apologies in advance. I've made no secret of the fact that I'm not terribly enamoured with the field of medicine or being a doctor, but I've managed to actually find a specialty that I love. Doubt on that last bit, but yep, we can tell in regards to the rest. Anyway, in this post, she talks about how she can't do the specialty that she wants to because it would mean moving to a different place, and she can't do that because she's married. And she says, being geographically flexible means possibly uprooting yourself to do the fellowship. It's not quite as big a deal to camp out in whatever land for a year if you're a single person, but it feels a lot more selfish to force your spouse and child to move with you, to give up your home, your daycare, your nanny, your spouse's job, etc. For a man with a family, it can be just as hard, but I'm going out on a sexist limb to say that it's harder for women for a couple of reasons. There are a lot of men who are totally cool with being stay-at-home dads, and I salute them, but most men aren't. In this economy, it's not easy to find a job, and there's a chance your spouse could be unemployed indefinitely if he gives up his job. For a lot of men, this would be a huge blow for their self-esteem, possibly one that's unacceptable and would result in marital discord. For women, less so in general. I think a lot of women tend to feel their careers take back seats to their husband's career and their family's needs. For me, the thought of uprooting my family for my own selfish career aspirations just feels really wrong. I can't do it. So that's that, my nerdy dream up in flames. And this just makes me feel quite sad for her, but again, what do I know? I'd feel a lot more sorry for her though if she didn't keep going on about how she chose the field she did because it was easy or easier than other options. Even when she talks about the positives of something in medicine, she has to whine about something like in this post. PM&R, the holy grail. For many graduating med students, lifestyle matters a lot. When we applied to med school, we all had a convincing story about how we want to help people, blah blah blah. And maybe at the time we meant it, or at least some of us did. But when it comes time to decide what specialty we want to do for the rest of our lives, other things become more important than just helping people and generally doing good. We've all got loans, rent, children or potential children, future alimony payments, etc. So money is important. And many of us have gone through waking up at 4 a.m. for surgery rotations on Saturday, horrors, and decided that's not so much for us. I'm gonna continue to be brutally frank. Get ready. I don't like to work that hard. I don't particularly like to wake up at 4 a.m. In fact, even 7 a.m. is a bit early for me. And that whole going to work on weekends thing, not a fan. Or staying up the entire night on call, Also not my favourite thing. When I was entrenched in my third year of med school, I realised that I desperately wanted a 9-to-5 type job. Lots of people have 9-to-5 jobs. Why not me? Why? Why did I possibly have to suffer through 3+ years of a horrible lifestyle in residency just to possibly have an equally busy practice after residency? I'd already worked so hard in med school, it wasn't fair. It wasn't fair, damn it. There were specialties out there that could have catered to the lifestyle I wanted. Dermatology residents have it pretty good, but my grades weren't good enough for that. That's what I was talking about earlier where she said the reason she didn't do it was her grades. Anyway, my grades were good for radiology perhaps if I was willing to go anywhere, but I wasn't. I was following my husband where he wanted to go for his career. Yes, I was one of those women. The brutal frankness continues below. If you want an easier life during residency and your options are limited by your grades and/or geography, there are 2 options, psychiatry and PM&R. Psychiatry, everyone knows what a psychiatrist is. I know this because people accidentally called me a psychiatrist about 5 times a day. In any case, psychiatry wasn't for me. I won't get into the reasons, but I was pretty sure about that. I think if you've read her book Ward D, which is ableist nonsense and demonization of anyone with a mental health condition, we know why she didn't go into psychiatry, but there we are. If you're not familiar, go check out my review of that book. So that left PM&R, which stands for either physical medicine and rehabilitation or plenty of money and relaxation, depending on who you talk to. I did a rotation as a med student, expected to be bored, but actually really liked it. I did my residency in PM&R and it was easy. It was rare that I had to wake up before 7 AM. I got home most days around 5 PM. I spent maybe 1 or 2 nights in the hospital during my entire residency. I had a life like a normal human being. Amazing. Moving on, we get a long rant from her, this time about why medicine is not for mothers. This is a December 2011 blog post titled Medicine, Not for Mothers. I have to be honest, I'm a little burned out on writing about what PM&R is and why it's so awesome. I've covered it before, both on this blog and my own. People email me questions about it frequently, which I'm happy to answer, but it's just hard to motivate myself to write yet another post about it. Medicine is not a great career for a mother. There, I said it. Since we were asked to address which aspects are not family friendly, allow me to do so. 1, it's unpredictable. When you're dealing with sick people, you can't predict your schedule. Whether you're doing inpatient or outpatient, you might think you're going to be done at 5 PM, and then your last patient will say, oh, by the way, I'm having 10 out of 10 chest pain. Imagine it's 6 PM, your patient says that, and you know your daycare will close in 15 minutes. It can and will happen. It's interesting how she never makes posts about why medicine's not for fathers, isn't it? Another reason she gives is it'll mess with your sleep-wake cycle. It's bad enough worrying that a baby will wake you up. Worrying that a baby or a pager will wake you up is enough to drive you crazy. I like my sleep, so this is a big one for me. How many times I wish to be in a job where I could sleep through the night every night? And lastly, she said, you can't take a break. In a lot of careers, you could probably take a year or 2 off after your child is born. In medicine, it's much harder. You forget stuff and you're rusty when you get back. Not a great thing when you're dealing with people's lives. And blah, blah, blah. It keeps going on. Finally, there are the posts where she tells stories from her job, and it just seems like she couldn't care less about the patients or anything she actually does in her role. This is August 2011. Tales from intern year. More ER stories. 8 o'clock, I arrive at the hospital. The waiting room is so ridiculously crowded that some patients are forced to sit on each other's laps. Luckily, we're understaffed tonight. 10 past 8. I'm assigned an OD patient. I'm supposed to do checks on her every 20 minutes. I do one and subsequently forget for the rest of the night. She's got nurses. Sorry, but you're writing about ignoring a seriously ill patient who could die at any moment, and you just forgot about her and left her to the nurses, and you're like, what's it matter? Like it's something to brag or joke about. That's not funny. That's not funny. 8:30, I see a patient who is here for rectal abscesses, although she's placed in the hallway, so I don't know how I'm supposed to look at it. Doesn't really matter though, because when I speak with this lady, she's clearly floridly psychotic. She keeps telling me she needs a penicillin shot for pneumonia. That was pretty much all I could understand, because she talked like Gollum on meth. I went back to my attending. This woman is crazy. I can't understand a word she's saying. Fortunately, after making her wait another hour, she left. 8:50, suicide attempt patient. Surprisingly, it wasn't me. Like, she just lacks empathy, and this all comes across as a bit scary, right? And again, we see her disdain for people with mental illnesses. 10:30, woman comes in smelling so strongly of alcohol, I feel like I'm getting drunk just talking to her. If only. 11 o'clock, I run into my arch nemesis Jessica in the hallway, who I've discovered I have to spend my first ICU week with. I do the hardest thing I've had to do all night, which is flash her a small, friendly smile. God, I hate her. She's horrible. She's absolutely horrible. 4:40, do I really have to do a rectal exam on the demented nursing home patient in room 4? 5 o'clock, I have 2 hours left. Now the game is, how few patients can I get away with seeing in the next 2 hours? It's doctors like this that make patients scared to ask for any help in the first place. Like, it's seriously messed up. And if no wonder she stays anonymous, because if I was her employer reading this blog, no chance she would ever get a job ever again, you know? But there are so many stories like this that Freida tells that just come across as mean and inconsiderate. Let's look at a few of her mean girl posts from both her personal and professional life. August 2011, bad roommates. So I've been writing about ways prior roommates have peed me off, but this is one where I was 100% guilty and still kind of feel bad about it. In college, I had a single during my junior year, but we had a locked hallway and I shared a bathroom with 3 other girls who I didn't really know. These girls were all Orthodox Jewish, and so on the Sabbath, they weren't allowed to do things like turn lights on and off. So they asked that on Friday evening and Saturday morning, I leave the light in the bathroom on. I never ever did it. Not purposely, it's just this automatic thing where I always shut the lights off when leaving a bathroom. It was a really hard habit to break. So I'd often pass by the bathroom on a Friday night and see one of my hallmates using the bathroom with the light out. I'd feel so bad. Yeah, but not bad enough to make an actual effort to change your behaviour. It's so inconsiderate. She just seems to in general lack consideration for others. So look at this post about, of all things, Build-A-Bear. This is March 2015, her weekly whine about Build-A-Bear. Blah blah blah, she goes on about the shop, cool. And then at the end she says, for $20 you can get your bear a motorcycle. For $10 he could wear a leather jacket to look cool on his motorcycle, and if something went wrong when he was driving the motorcycle, you could get him a wheelchair for $25. If I ever find myself buying my child a wheelchair for her bear, you'll know that I've done something seriously wrong as a parent. Like, I'm sorry, what do you mean seriously wrong as a parent? Like, letting your child know that disabilities are normal. You know, this item that allows kids and adults in wheelchairs to see themselves represented in the toys and collectibles that they play with and collect. Like, that's lovely. That's a great thing. That's really important. I don't get why she's complaining about it. Yeah, a lot of the Build-A-Bear items can be a bit expensive. That's understandable, but I don't think, like, complaining about the fact that, like, oh, I'd never buy a wheelchair for a bear, but, like, it gives me the same vibes as, you know, the people who complain about, you know, things like tools for opening bottles or, like, fastening buttons or whatever. They simply can't fathom that people exist and they live their lives with different needs and experiences to them. You know, they seem to forget that people with disabilities exist, and that's the vibes I get from this post. Anyway, here's a few more examples of Freida being angry about stuff. June 2009. Usually I try not to post twice in a row, but I'm angry about this now. October 2009. When someone makes a comment about rich doctors, I want to punch them. June 2010. While I was walking home from a lunch date with my daughter yesterday, I inexplicably started to get peed off about the fact I never had a baby shower. I don't know what set me off. There are a lot of babies in my neighbourhood, so maybe it was that. And then she goes on an angry rant about a colleague of hers, like, having a baby shower, but she didn't, and blah, blah, blah. And she gets angry about it for paragraphs. November 2010, I don't like working weekends. Well, who does, right? I mean, there are probably a few people who like it for some reason, but I'm guessing most people don't enjoy working weekends. But I really, really don't like working weekends. When I have to get up to work at the weekend, I usually spend much of my time at work on the brink of tears, accompanied by a steady stream of resentment towards all people who don't have to work that day. Then I usually come down with a cold the next day, so I feel like I might dislike working weekends more than average. But I could be wrong. That could be average. February 2011. Man, I love doing this weekly whine. I could do this every day and never run out of things to complain about. Every hour, maybe. And it's not like she's not aware of her whining and anger either. October 2010. Being judgmental. In my last 2 posts, a handful of people felt that I was being judgmental. My official reply to that, I suppose, would be, wah, wah, wah. Meaning this. We all get judged all the time. For everything. Whether people mean it or not, do women get judged more than men? Possibly. Do female physicians get judged more than non-physicians? Actually, I doubt it. And no matter how much you protest that you do not judge others, we all do. One person commented that we must be supportive of all women. Supportive of all women? What about a female patient who comes into our clinic pregnant and drinking vodka? Obviously, we wouldn't support this decision just because she's a woman. I know that seems like an extreme example, but there are lots of crunchy internet mums who think giving your baby formula is just as bad as guzzling vodka during pregnancy. We judge any decision we don't agree with that we think is potentially harmful. The point I'd like to make, though, is not that we should all try to be less judgmental and more supportive of each other, because let's face it, that's never gonna happen. The one thing I've learned, though, is that you must try to be happy with your own choices. The judgments that really hurt me were the ones where I wasn't sure I was doing the right thing and already felt guilty about it, i.e. giving formula. So while it would be great if we could all support each other, what I'm really trying to say is that we should try to support ourselves. And she left a comment on this, like, before anyone could reply, saying, "My husband, who I now think is incredibly wise, read this post and told me I'm probably the least judgmental person he's ever met. But what else are you supposed to write about on a blog aside from your opinions?" I think he's right on the mark with that one. But if I'm forced to make a post that are completely devoid of judgments and opinions, what am I supposed to write about? My kid's poop? Because I can do that. I could easily write like 5 pages about her poop if that would be preferable. Oh my god, which would be funny, except when she writes about interactions with her kid, she's also really like judgy and nasty and seems to lack compassion too. Oh god, I can't believe it. Okay, before we get into that though, I'm gonna take another break because I'm exhausted, so I'll be back in a bit. I'm not used to this talking for an hour at a time thing. Need to rest my voice a bit. Thanks for understanding. Alright, hi everyone, day 2 of filming. I'm going to try and fit this in before I'm going to go see one of my favourite bands tonight, which is exciting. They're called The Feeling, and it's their 20th anniversary of their first album, 12 Stops and Home, so I'm really excited for it. I've got the like extra package where like you see a little extra show beforehand and do a little Q&A with the band, so yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be good. I need something to make me happy at the minute, and this feels good. And tomorrow night I'm seeing Lily Allen, which is very exciting. I can't wait for that. Okay, so where were we with this? We were talking about interactions with her kids and how she seems to lack a lot of kindness and consideration there. Even though like she goes on about how much she loves her kids, when she actually talks about the interactions with them, it's a little off. You know, it just This was January 2016 in a post called Art. Every day, the daycare gives me at least 3 or 4 pieces of my younger daughter's artwork to bring home with me. While it's nice to see her work, let's be honest here, I'm gonna throw it out. If I didn't throw out 99% of her artwork, my house would have dissolved into one of those hoarder shows where I'd have to navigate between mountains of popsicle stick towers and hills of macaroni art. I still feel bad when I throw out her pictures though. I have to put them in a separate trash from the regular trash so she doesn't find out. Except one day my husband was changing our alternative trash can and she saw all her pictures lying on top of the garbage pile. "What are all my beautiful pictures doing in here?" she cried, incredibly offended. We then had to rescue all her paintings from the garbage. Don't worry, I threw them away again that night when she was in bed. I'm not sure what to do about this. Obviously I can't save her artwork, but she seems so hurt the few times she's realised I've been throwing it all away. Is this the sort of thing she's going to be describing 20 years from now in therapy sessions? Yes. So I have a similar story to this. Back when I was in school, we had to do like DT classes, which is design technology, and we had different rotations that were like cooking, textiles, woodwork, and metalwork. And so I, in the woodworking one, spent like 7 weeks once making this little like handmade game for my mum, and I spent ages picking out pieces in like the colours that she'd like, and I like worked through my break times on it and stuff to get it finished in time, and I gave it to her for Mother's Day, and I was so damn proud of it because I'm good at DIY, I'm not good at like building from scratch. So like me doing woodwork age 12, that was like a big thing, me like making this thing that actually looked like the thing it was supposed to. That was huge for me. And then a couple of years later, I saw that she'd given like the base of it to my dad when he needed some scrap wood, and he'd basically like ripped it apart and used it for something else and thought nothing of it. And I was like, what the hell? Like, what? Do you know how long I spent on this? I spent hours on this, like 15 plus hours, and I'd like I say, stayed behind my break times and stuff, and they just like carelessly torn it apart and reused it for something that like I don't even know what, something not important. And they didn't even understand why I was upset by it. And to this day, like if I think about that too long, it still makes me cry. When I was working on the script, I had a cry over this. And to this day, I don't think my parents realised why it upset me so much. And yeah, I did end up like speaking to my therapist about this in my sort of like mid to late 20s, and like it taught me that like I couldn't rely on my parents, that they wouldn't have this level of gratitude that I needed from them. And I eventually like just stopped giving my mum and my dad Mother's Day and Father's Day gifts because I realised like they don't actually give a damn, and if I spend all my time and effort on something, it's just going to get thrown in a corner and forgotten about, or it's going to get broken apart and they're not going to care about it. So why should I bother putting in so much love and effort when they're not going to bother caring about it? And to this day I still don't give them presents for Mother's and Father's Day because they don't appreciate it. So yeah, this stuff, like, it does stick with you. But like on the other hand, I used to draw pictures with and for my granny all the time when I was a kid. And like, especially when she was ill, we used to play this like silly game where she would like do some scribbles or doodles on a piece of paper, and then I would make like a picture out of it and be like, oh, I can see a penguin in this, I can see this, I can see, that sort of silly stuff. And we play a lot of those games, and I just thought they were like little scrap paper doodles and stuff like that. But then I'd also do like bigger, more like, special pieces of art for her and stuff. And I think when she died, I must have been around 7 or 8, something like that. And after she was gone, like, my dad and his siblings were like going through her stuff and clearing out her bungalow and everything. And they found in this drawer, she'd kept every single piece of art that I'd made her or that we'd done together. Even those little like doodles on scrap paper, she had kept them all. And they were in perfect condition, and they were all like stacked up neatly, and like she kept them, and she kept them safe, and she treasured them, and that meant so much to me. And they gave them back to me afterwards, and I still have them to this day. Because she knew how much love I put into those drawings, and she knew how much fun we had making them together, some of them, and she treasured them. And so now I treasure them too, because it reminds me how much she loved me. And that's what I think Freida's kind of forgetting. Like, when you just throw out your kids' artworks, you're being practical. Like, a kid doesn't understand that. They just think they've made you something special. They put love into something, and you're tossing it away. That's all they see. You know what I mean? So when I read Freida being this callous about her kid's upset, which I think is very valid, it makes me kind of angry, because I know just how that kid feels and how much that pain will stick with them. So this did upset me a little bit. There's other examples of this too, of her just being quite callous. So October 2016, my older daughter's latest thing is accusing me of not being genuine. Like, she got angry at me because she showed me her drawing and she felt that my ooh sounded phony. Well, it was kind of phony, but what the hell was I supposed to do? It was a drawing of a cat. Maybe show an interest, be like, oh, that's great. Like, encourage her, be like, what inspired you to do this? Is it a particular cat? What, like, medium did you use to draw it? But show an interest, August 2010, Mummy-Daughter Day, so this is a bit earlier than the others, but same thing. For the first time in over 3 years, I have a day off during the week to spend with my daughter. It's heaven, it's what I've always wanted, except I'm not sure what the hell to do with her all day. After less than an hour in the park, I was ready to shoot myself in the head. We ended up fighting a lot, and I eventually just plopped her down in front of the television. You have no idea how glad I feel to, like, not be Freida's daughter reading this stuff. Like, if I was her daughter and I grew up and I read this stuff afterwards as well, I would literally never speak to her again. In a comment on another post, she wrote, "It's funny because after I posted this, I was putting my daughter to bed too late as usual, and just as soon as the lights were out, she said, 'I'm hungry.' And I snapped, 'It's too late, go to sleep.' And she immediately burst into tears and said, 'I don't like it when you yell at me. Now you're making me cry.' I don't know if this is a typical child response to getting yelled at, but it always breaks my heart." Again, I'm so glad I'm not her kid. In her latest book, Dear Debbie, which is definitely a self-insert, because, as we'll see later, Freida always inserts herself into her stories, like, anyway. And I've just finished my script for the review of that as well, so I'm going to film it after this one. But in that book, she's this, like, 40-something-year-old mum, like Freida, with a daughter who's 17, and I think at the point of writing it, Freida's daughter is like 18 or 19 or something. And the 17-year-old is like snappy with her mum. She's like really held back. She doesn't want to spend time with her mum and all this sort of thing. And it's like, well, yeah, if this is like a natural self-insert of Freida and her daughter, I understand why her daughter's being like this when I read this stuff about her childhood. Do you know what I mean? And anyway, just to jump back again to her being aware of how much she complains. January 2011. Bitter? Well, a little. For those of you who read my posts, such as my rant about how much it sucks to work weekends and how the bright light at the end of the tunnel is a big fat lie, you probably think I'm incredibly bitter and unhappy, that I'm some kind of cranky old doctor who sits on my porch confiscating the wayward baseballs of little children. Some of you have suggested I switch fields. Well, really, you don't need to worry so much about Fizzy. The truth is, I kind of like my job. It's not perfect. You're not going to catch me in my job alone in a closet doing unspeakable things. I worry about some of you, really. But I'm quite satisfied. For starters, I don't work weekends. I sometimes really help people. So your next question is undoubtedly, but Fizzy, you're always whining and moaning. If you're happy, why don't you shut the hell up already? Well, it's a good question. It is a good question. Although quite rudely phrased. You phrased it. It's sort of like this. Say you spent the whole day cleaning your giant house. It sucks, but when it's done, you can maybe finally relax. Except you can't relax because you pulled a muscle in your back and have excruciating pain for the next several weeks. It's sort of like that. I don't get it, but okay. And she keeps going on. Moaning and moaning, blah blah, and yet then also she goes on and writes posts like this. May 2011. I might be one of the most polite doctors in the world. You might be surprised to hear that, considering I can sometimes be a bit of a bitch in my online posts and comments, but I promise that in real life, I'm pretty much ridiculously nice to everyone. To a fault, really. I think the worst thing, though, is her habit of being really mean to people that she knows and people that she's worked with in her posts. And she even points out that she does it because she doesn't think they'll ever read it. So she thinks she can just say anything about anyone, and it's just a bit mean. June 2012, Weekly Wine, Jenny. This is a story about one of the most annoying residents I've ever had to work with. I've been hesitant to post it forever because I was nervous about Jenny discovering it and realising I was writing about her. Actually, I got to like Jenny a lot later, and I don't want to hurt her feelings, but then I just figured, F it, she'll never read this. What the hell? Or in another post, for starters, my first resident as an intern was a cruel bitch who tore me down on my first day and continued to bat me down every time I tried to recover. Funnily enough, she ended up writing a book about this woman, but we'll get to that later. And this isn't the only time she's called a colleague a bitch. She does that quite a lot. It's very common. Every woman she doesn't like is a bitch. It's bitch, 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 bitch. But yet she has the audacity to complain about the word bitch being used on TV. So October 2013, I find it really shocking and upsetting that the word bitch does not get censored on general TV. My daughter really enjoys cooking shows. She's really into cooking and making taste tests, and we're totally watching MasterChef Junior this year, but I'm always on the edge of my seat because people on MasterChef and other adult cooking shows will come out using the word bitch, which is a word she otherwise would never hear in our house. We never swear, but apparently Freida does all the time in her blogs. I just want to watch a cooking competition. It's not like freaking, I don't know, South Park. I'm just gonna flick through quickly some of the other things she has to complain about, which include but are not limited to flowers, gifts, hyphenated surnames, people who won't apologise, and people enjoying their lunch break. On a more positive note, though, to end this section, she did seem to have a slight change of heart years later. This was November 2018, titled Don't Stop Reading. She says, I was reading some of my old blog entries I'd written here ages ago. It shocked me how brazenly I criticised my co-residents and attendings. I was fearless and or stupid. I didn't care if they discovered these posts. In fact, I hoped they would, because then they would see what a jackass they were for complaining to the female resident who had taken time off to have surgical repair for her 4th degree tear during childbirth that you just had a vacation. Vacation equals maternity leave. But now I care. I wouldn't insult people from my current job or even my last job. It's a small field and I respect those people too much. And I don't want to talk about my family. This is not a mummy blog. I don't want to be the author of a mummy blog. So there's still a little bit of like backhanded stuff in there, but it's an improvement. It's better. And while she didn't stop complaining at this point entirely, she did stop calling specific colleagues bitches and other cruel names. So that is a positive, and I have to give it to her. There is some growth there, and we love to see that. I think the thing that annoys me most about all this, and I've had time to think about this recently because, you know, wallowing in grief, is that Freida comes across as really immature in her meanness, and this is something that really bothers me. When she was writing most of this mean stuff, she would have been between the ages of 30 and 38. I could understand if she was like an immature 20-something-year-old, but she's a grown adult and a mother in her 30s acting like this, and it just feels a bit like, be immature, you know? There was, however, a really bizarre period of time where Freida would get really weird about people, especially women that she thought were good looking. And so in the next section, I want to take a look at a few of those posts. Obviously, we've already seen the pretty girls don't need to be doctors post, which was horrific, but there's a few more in the same vein. For example, February 2011, residency match versus hotness. I know. So apparently residency match is coming up in the next month. Eek, aren't you guys excited? In honor of the upcoming match, I did a little exercise involving the match list from my graduating med school class, inexplicably still saved on my hard drive. I picked out the hottest 10 girls in my class and the hottest 10 guys, and I wrote down what each of them matched in. I was bored and possibly drunk. I don't think I've ever done something this odd when I was drunk. And again, I'll remind you, she was like 31 when she was doing this, so not much younger than I am now. It was really easy to pick out the top 10 hottest girls in my class. Maybe female beauty is just more objective. Within a minute, I had a list and could have added a few more even. I mulled over the top 10 guys for a long time, struggling to come up with 10 guys in my former class that I actually thought were attractive. It was hard because I didn't want my own personal preferences about the opposite sex to get in the way of this extremely important objective exercise. I like nerdy, overweight guys with glasses. That's probably not any universal standard of male attractiveness though. Or, I don't know, maybe my class just had a lot of unattractive guys. Anyway, here were the results. The top 10 girls went into general surgery, pediatrics, medicine, psychiatry, neurology, anesthesia, and radonc. Oh, probably something to do with oncology, I think. Top 10 guys: ortho, urology, plastics, dermatology, anesthesia, EM, general surgery, pediatrics, radiology. So from these lists, we can deduce that the hot guys did much better in the match than the hot girls, going for far more competitive specialities. So if you're a guy, it helps your career to be hotter. If you're a girl, not so much. Although really, that's not the case at all. Looking at the general list, it seems like the guys just match more competitively in general. The ortho matches are all guys, of course. So were all the urology matches. Even radiology was most guys. Derm, ophthalmology, all guys. The only competitive specialties that match a good number of females were anesthesia and EM. So in summary, being hotter probably wouldn't have helped me match in a more competitive specialty. Growing a penis might. I would actually really appreciate her calling out these gender differences like this and how often men, especially cis, straight, white men, have it so much easier in general. But it's all undermined by her lists of hot people and the way she continually talks about people's looks in this and her other posts and the weird objectification of people, you know? For more examples, let's move on. This one is called The Pretty Weird Med Student. When I was doing an ortho elective during my residency, there was a med student also rotating with us named Chelsea. Chelsea had a lot going for her. First of all, she was really beautiful, not in an intimidating way, but in a really cute way. On top of that, she was also incredibly smart. She was probably one of the smartest med students I'd come across, and she was from a stellar med school. She was only a med student and knew way more ortho than I did. I figured this girl could do no wrong. Interestingly, one afternoon, I heard 2 male residents talking about Chelsea while she was in the OR, and they didn't have good things to say. I was shocked. I mean, here's a med student who's really smart and conscientious and eager, and most importantly, hot. Why weren't they drooling all over her? The senior resident remarked that Chelsea was weird, that when he addressed another resident to ask him a question about his patient, she would answer for him. That is sort of weird. The other resident remarked that Chelsea was annoying, and he was trying to interview a consult patient and she was tagging along and kept interrupting the interview to ask her own questions. She did that to me too, and I found it really annoying, but I thought it was a problem with me, since she was clearly so awesome. It was a nice vindication to find out other people found her annoying too, and in all the bitching about Chelsea, neither of them mentioned how hot she was. I have to say, I was impressed with those guys. I mean, they were orthopods. Like, I'm sorry, you're impressed because grown adult men are being mean about a colleague and putting her down, but hey, at least they didn't sexually objectify her while they were doing it. What? It's almost like she enjoys seeing women that she perceives as pretty being put down in some way. I don't get it. I don't like reading it, and like I say, it happens quite a lot in the blog. Oh, I think actually this might be the weirdest one though. You ready? August 2011. Deanie. For years, whenever I heard anything about scoliosis, I thought about Deanie. Deanie is a book by Judy Blume about a beautiful 13-year-old girl who's trying for a modelling career until it's discovered she has scoliosis. As a result of this curvature of her spine, she must wear a Milwaukee brace going down from her neck to her hips for the rest of high school. This pretty much kills her modelling aspirations. Suddenly she goes from being the prettiest girl in school to being given permission to take the bus for disabled kids. This book definitely served to fill me with fear as a child. Every time the pediatrician told me to bend down and touch my toes, I knew what they were looking for. It was terrifying. I didn't want to end up like Deanie. Luckily, I did not have scoliosis and my modelling aspirations were realised. Not really. A fine start, I think. This makes sense. I can see this being exactly how a self-conscious 13-year-old girl would think. I have no problems with this. However, anyway, when I was rotating in pediatric orthopedics, we had a 13-year-old patient in our clinic who was absolutely gorgeous. She was so beautiful that the attending felt a need to comment on her looks no less than 3 times while we were in the room, and once straddled her in a way that was borderline inappropriate to demonstrate her scoliosis to her parents. And she knew she was hot. I could tell by the way she flipped her hair back after she stood up from touching her toes. Okay, how about instead of writing a complaining blog post about this, we call out our colleagues who make creepy comments towards literal children and touch them in inappropriate ways? How about we just call that out on the spot? And how about, as well, we don't say things like, she knew she was hot about a literal sick child. Can we not, please? I don't think that's too much to ask for. No. You couldn't tell from a few feet away, but she had a 35-degree scoliosis, which is pretty significant. It calls for bracing, especially in a female, when the curve is likely to progress. But instead of being offered the life-ruining Milwaukee brace, she was given 2 different options. One was a Boston brace, which she could wear 20 hours a day, taking it off only for some sports activities. The other was a Charleston brace, which she could wear just at night while she slept. The attending said that most girls opted for the night brace. Both the Boston and the Charleston braces are TLSOs, which only go up to the thoracic spine. The Milwaukee brace is a CTLSO, which goes all the way up to the cervical spine, neck. I'd read that the Milwaukee is indicated for curvature at above the T8 level, which our patient's scoliosis certainly was, so why wasn't she prescribed the Milwaukee? My attending's answer, have you seen the Milwaukee brace? So apparently in this day and age, they don't force hot teenage girls to wear cumbersome, life-ruining braces. Too bad Deanie wasn't 13 in the 20th century. Again, she's like 31 writing this. Can you please stop saying phrases like hot teenage girl, please? Like, just no, stop it. And how about we celebrate that there have been advances in medicine that we can now offer people a variety of options that will actually fit their lifestyle and their needs instead of whatever the hell this is. It almost sounds like Freida is jealous of a child. It's bizarre and I don't like it at all. Okay, I promise we're very nearly done. We're nearly done. The final section I want to cover is Freida writing about her experiences as both a reader and a writer, and kind of linked to this, her inability to take criticism, both about her blogs and her books. Chronologically, Freida's first post about this was in November 2009, when she complained that Jane Austen was pretty heavy stuff, and that the thought of reading Pride and Prejudice made her ill. Online drama can be very hard to resist. Recently, someone online was recommending that I read Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, and the thought of it made me ill. I try and do a little reading when I can, but Jane Austen is pretty heavy stuff. I jokingly replied that I was a working mum and that I couldn't focus on anything that couldn't be read in 15-minute spurts with a toddler screaming in my ear. Jane Austen doesn't really fall into that category. The person replied that she was a working mum too, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who's managed to read Jane Austen or other books with at least a little substance. Ouch. It took every fibre in my being to end that conversation and not get drawn into an argument. Every fibre of my being. But of course, I then went to look at my bookcase to verify that my reading list is not completely vapid, although I've been getting most of my books from the library lately. Alright, there was perhaps an overabundance of books with the word shopaholic in the title. Recently read Kinsella's Remember Me? So good. I've been making the rounds on the New York Times bestseller list with The Time Traveler's Wife and Prep. I've also got a book called Murder on the Rehab Unit, which as a rehab doctor, I was compelled to purchase, although apparently not read. All in all, I'm not entirely sure I've read anything of substance lately. Actually, I don't think I've read anything of substance in years, unless of course you count all the zillions of articles that I read for work, the textbooks and of course, e-medicine and up to date. I guess that's why when I read something for myself, I like it to be fun and light. What about you? Is Jane Austen something you trudge through in your spare time? Do you try to go for books for substance, or do you unwind with guilty pleasures? Mixed feelings about this here. I wouldn't exactly call Jane Austen heavy or difficult, you know? Austen's no James Joyce. I feel like as classics go, she's pretty simple. I mean, there is substance there, but it's fairly simple to read. Again, it's no Chaucer, you know? I mean, like, no one's saying you have to sit there and read the Canterbury Tales in, like, the original Middle English, you know what I mean? Jane Austen is not hard to read in that respect. That said, I don't begrudge people wanting something more digestible or modern, you know, just to read for funsies if period lit isn't your thing. There's nothing wrong with that. I do think, first and foremost, reading should be fun. It should be enjoyable. You shouldn't feel like you have to read something just because other people are. Like, I get that. But I did just want to include this post because I think it tells us a lot about where Freida gets her writing style from, why it is what it is, who she draws inspiration from, like Sophie Kinsella and so on. We first saw Freida's aspirations to be an author in a 2010 blog post called My Secret Life of Blogging. She says, ever since I was a little kid, I always wanted to have a diary. During college, the internet was becoming pretty big, although clearly just a fad, and I found a few interesting blogs online. In the midst of studying for my midterms during sophomore year, I decided to give it a go. Everyone I knew was informed about this blog, which was how I found readership. My parents would make comments like, "You sound a lot more bubbly and happy on your blog posts than you do in real life." In real life, I'm apparently chronically depressed, which is funny because she says the opposite now. She's like, "No, I moan online, but I'm so happy in my real life, honest." My blog is also a good way to inform my boyfriend that I was peed off at him, but for the most part, the entries were poop. Brief random musings that had nothing to do with anything, blah 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 blah. But somehow knowing people were reading kept me going, and I wrote in the blog all through college. Then in med school, I took my blog offline, but I kept writing, and I now wrote in-depth entries about my experience going through the oft-times fun, but mostly pretty horrible training process. Anyone who says, I love med school, just know that I hate you. You in med school should go get a room. After med school, I discovered LiveJournal, and I moved my blogging over there. It has a great format in that not only can you lock individual entries, but you can filter entries so that only a handful of trusted people can read the more personal, gut-wrenching stuff. I've been blogging there for the last 5 years, with all entries locked. That way I don't have to worry about that thrill or fear in the pit in my stomach when a colleague or family member discovers my blog. It's nice to have a public web presence though, which is why I like blogging for Mothers in Medicine. But does my family know about it? Other than my husband, no. There have been tons of times when I wrote an entry that I would have loved my mother to see, but then I realised that if I showed it to her, I'd have to constantly be censoring myself here. I do censor myself somewhat though. It's a mistake to think that anyone on the internet is completely anonymous. Whenever I write an entry, I ask myself if I would be in any trouble if everyone I knew saw this entry. If the answer is yes, I don't post it. A few times I've complained about resident colleagues on here, but I was secretly hoping they'd find the entry and realise what a penis they'd been. When I started my cartoon blog, I fully intended to tell my parents about it. However, I showed my father, a psychiatrist, one cartoon, and he declared it not funny. See where she gets her parenting style from. I decided that I'd prefer to stay anonymous than deal with any more negative critiques. My husband reads the blog though, and he says he appreciates my really immature sense of humour. I think the best thing about blogging is looking back on old entries. After my intern year, I went back and collected all the entries into a book, which I published on Lulu for myself. And this is Intern Year by Name Redacted. And this was Freida's first book. How cute. And we can see here not only like her wanting to write books and have people read and, you know, write all the time. That seems to be her passion, even if she's not very good at it. This was something that was quite important to her very early on. Also, her wanting to be anonymous online was a thing that she started with very early on, and something that she obviously still maintains to this day with her pen name and bad wigs, and us not actually knowing her real name or who she is or anything really about her. The next post we're going to look at was January 2011, Dr. Chick Lit. I always used to read a lot as a kid, but when I started med school, I decided that anything I read ought to be medicine related, so I pretty much gave up on reading for fun. What do you mean reading Robin's pathological basis of disease wasn't fun? But in my last year of residency, I was sufficiently bored that I decided to open myself back up to fiction again. I'm mildly embarrassed to admit, but I love chick lit. I don't know why, because I hate fashion and flowers and jewelry and everything else girly, but I love these books. It's especially shocking because I used to be such a little book snob when I was a teenager, and I'm sure I would have mocked older me mercilessly for reading a book about a woman who helps her quirky ghost great aunt find a lost necklace. Bonus points if you know the book I'm talking about. I don't, but if you guys do, let me know in the comments. But I don't have anything to prove anymore, so I'm going to read what I want, damn it. I recently discovered a list of the ultimate top 100 chick lit novels, and noting that I've already read and enjoyed 7 of the top 10, I decided to make it my mission for 2011 to work my way through the list. Come on, who's with me? But you know what bugs me about chick lit? How none of the female protagonists are ever doctors. Seriously, on that list of 100 books, you'll find women who are lawyers, teachers, PR reps, a popular chick lit career, iBankers, and basically tons of great careers. No doctors. There are no chick lit books about doctors. Is anyone else starting to see Freida get inspired here? Yeah? Sorry, I'm gonna get slouchy here for a second. Let me just get comfy cozy. Why the hell not? There are lots of doctors writing memoirs. There are lots of thrillers written about doctors. I used to be a big Robin Cook fan until I realised the villain was always evil managed care. There are tons of TV shows about doctors, some of which involve doctors hooking up a lot. Grey's Anatomy. There are comedies about doctors. Scrubs. So I don't know why female doctors can't be protagonists in chick lit. The devil can wear scrubs, can't she? Funnily enough, or not so funnily enough, Freida's very first novel that she ever wrote was called The Devil Wears Scrubs. So it's clear that this is something she'd been thinking about for a long time, because she wrote this in 2011 and the book didn't come out until 2013, so 2 years later. You can probably tell this really bothers me. Why can't someone write a novel about a female doctor who's riding on a plane, ends up telling all her secrets to the cute guy next to her, then it turns out he's her new boss and she also has a shopping addiction? What's up with that? Do you notice how Rita? I don't know why I want to call her Rita then. Do you notice how Freida is way more passionate about talking about books and writing and reading than she's ever been about anything medicine related? Found that interesting. Clearly medicine is not her passion. She does not like being a doctor. She does not like medicine. Reading and writing is her passion. It's just a shame that her books are so poor quality because she clearly loves it, you know? Let's look at another example. December 2011, love of reading. I've loved to read ever since I was a kid. When I was 8 years old, I discovered the Babysitters Club, which I'm embarrassed to admit sucked me in and got me reading regularly. For me, it was Goosebumps. Loved the Goosebumps books. And Point Horror as well. They were great. In grade school, I read like crazy. Kids books. Oh, and Jacqueline Wilson. I've made videos about her before that. She's great. Sorry. Anyway, in grade school, I read like crazy. Kids books, adults books, whatever someone recommended to me and I could get my hands on. One time, I read 3 library books in one day. It was my passion. As I got to high school, both my school workload and my social life picked up, and I didn't read as much. In college, I mostly read the books I was assigned in class, some of which were great. That's how I discovered Jane Eyre. Love that book. It's one of my favourites too. I'm due a reread actually. It's been a few years since. When I got to medical school, I made a conscious decision I wasn't going to read for fun anymore. I felt that if I was reading something, it ought to be related to my medical education. So I quit reading for 8 years. It didn't feel that big a sacrifice because I hadn't read something I really enjoyed in a while. Then, in my last year of residency, Casey asked if any of us could review a book for this blog. I volunteered, and when I read the book, I remember how much I used to enjoy reading, so I started up again. Recently, I was reading an article about a woman who read a book a day for a year. This is not something I could ever do for many, many reasons. Just reading the article brought on a bit of an eye strain headache, but I was inspired by this woman's quest and how her love of reading inspired a love of reading in her children. My daughter recently observed me reading and said, how come you're not saying the words out loud? Then she seized my book and pretended to read it to herself. There's truly nothing like getting lost in a good book. Unfortunately, I've had to wade through some junk, but it's worth it for the good ones. I also joined a book club that's inspired me to read some stuff I wouldn't have read otherwise. I haven't exactly read 365 books a year, but I have been keeping a reading list linked to my blog, and it looks like I've read 43 books this year. Just great going for the end of December. That's brilliant. Well done. I always kept a book next to me for when the baby falls asleep while nursing. If reading is something you love, you can always make time for it. And I kind of loved reading this. That positivity is what's missing in her blog post about being a doctor. Yeah, this is what we like to see. Someone being passionate about their life and career and the things that they're doing day to day. Like, this is great. The Devil Wears Scrubs was her first book, which was announced September 2013, 2.5 years after she first dropped that idea for a title and concept in that blog post that we read a minute ago. This book is technically fiction, but she admits it's pretty autobiographical, as she says, I did it! I wrote that book about my intern year. The Devil Wears Scrubs by Freida McFadden, obviously a pen name. It's fiction, but it kind of isn't, you know? In any case, if you enjoy my writing, I feel certain you'll enjoy reading it. Here's the blurb. Newly minted Dr. Jane McGill is in hell. Not literally, of course. Between her drug-addicted patient, sleepless nights on call, and battling wits with the sadistic yet charming, sexy surgeon, Jane can't imagine an afterlife much worse than her first month of medical internship at County Hospital. And then there's the devil herself, Jane's senior resident, Dr. Alyssa Morgan. When Alyssa becomes absolutely hell-bent on making her new interns pay tenfold for the deadly sin of incompetence, Jane starts to worry that she may not make it through the year with her soul or her sanity intact. Please buy it. Sadly, she got a few negative reviews about this book, along with some good ones. There were some good ones, and she decided to address them, 9 months? A month later, just 1 month later, I'm getting all my dates mixed up. Just 1 month later in a blog post titled, The Devil Wears Scrubs, Addressing Comments. I'm overwhelmed by the number of nice comments I've gotten on The Devil Wears Scrubs. Love that. But there have been a few persistent negative comments I've gotten on Amazon that I wish to address here. 1, it's too short. That's legitimate. If I had to do over again, I would have definitely written an epilogue. Kind of bothers me here because, like, when people are saying, like, it's too short, they mean, like, it's probably not developed enough, the story moves too quickly, like, there wasn't enough detail in bits, like, not just you need to stick an epilogue on it, you know? 2, Alyssa the Evil Resident isn't too much of a stereotype. Yep, except nearly everything she did was actually done to me by a particular resident. Maybe there's a reason things are stereotypes because they're real. 3, we never find out why Alyssa doesn't like Jane. How many times in your life has someone been a jerk to you and you found out it was because, like, you reminded them of their great aunt who never believed in them? Most of the time when someone doesn't like you, there's no real good reason and you never ever find out why. I refused to come up with some contrived reason that didn't feel real to me. And I feel like this whole post highlights a couple of problems with Freida. 1, she's not great at taking criticism in general and she doesn't tend to take it on board. She just kind of makes excuses for it and moves on. 2, she seems to get an idea for a book and wants to write just that thing rather than be willing to adapt and edit and improve it to make it a better reader experience for the readers. 3, just because something is realistic in Freida's mind, that doesn't mean it works well in a book. Generally, books have to make more narrative sense than real life. In real life, you don't necessarily have a beginning, middle, and end to every scenario, but in a book, you kind of need that for it to be satisfying and it to be well written, and for readers to actually enjoy it, you know? People want their questions answered and loose ends tied up. This isn't a memoir. You chose to make it a novel, you chose to make it fiction, so you generally need to stick to the main conventions of that format if you want people to like it. You're right that in real life we don't always get the answers to every question we have, but in a novel, readers want those answers. In a good novel, we should get those answers, you know? Obviously, there's a few exceptions if you're breaking rules on purpose, but speaking generally. And 4, she seems quite lazy. I don't think it's that she felt it was wrong to come up with a reason. I think she was just being a bit lazy. Freida seems to like everything to be over and done with quickly, whether that's reading or writing. She wants the instant gratification, and she doesn't seem to have much patience for actually taking time and developing ideas. So I feel like even when she has got feedback from people, she's not really done much to change her writing. She doesn't really like work on improving things. She just wants to be like, oh, written a book, done, put it out, next one. Oh, written a book, done, put it out, next one. You know what I mean? She also seems very stuck in her ways, as we see in this next post. There's a line in this which I feel borders on, if not racist, then at least a little intolerant, and it made me feel icky. This was June 2014. Weekly Wine, you'd like this book. I do like to read a lot, and I admit I'm usually on the lookout for new books. I've been into mystery and thriller books, and I recently read everything the library had to offer by Tess Gerritsen. And so yes, I'm looking for new books to read, but it baffles me the kind of recommendations that people who know me quite well seem to make to me. For example, someone who knows me very well and everything I like was recommending an Indian writer to me who writes about early life in India. I don't know, maybe it's great, but it does not on any level seem like the kind of book I would read. My father-in-law is always recommending these weird guy books that I would never read, like authors that by authors that if I have read a book by them I hated it. Philip Roth, Don DeLillo. If you know me and you actually have a decent book to recommend me, fine, but don't play up something that you've read that is obviously something that wouldn't interest me. So it kind of feels like the only authors she wants to read are straight white American women. And that's a little, I don't want to say problematic, but like, she's not really expanding her worldview at all, is she? She's not allowing herself to be open to other possibilities. Her line about like not wanting to read something because it's written by an Indian author who writes about life in India, I'm like, that got to me a bit. Felt icky, you know? Her last blog post about what books she likes to read was this one on September 2014, and again, I think it explains a lot about where Freida gets her inspiration from and why she has such a poor writing style in her novels. This is called Young Adult. Lately I've been reading a lot of young adult books. They're sort of addictive in that it's hard to go back to normal books after reading a few of them. And I'll say this, I don't have an issue at all with young adult books. I think they can still be written well, they can still be engaging, they can still be like brilliant books, nothing against them. The things I don't like are what she says she likes about them, so we'll get into it. What I like about young adult books. The language is simple and easy to read. For example, these are the first 2 sentences of a regular adult book I recently tried to read. An icy rush of air, a freezing slipstream on the newly exposed skin. She is, with no warning, outside the inside, and the familiar wet, tropical world has suddenly evaporated. I had to read that like 3 times in order to absorb it. I am way too tired for a book written like that. So, 1, that's not actually the start of the book, there's a chapter beforehand. And 2, I'm pretty sure that's Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. And I read that years ago, we're talking like 10 years ago, so I don't remember all the details, but I do remember it not being especially difficult. It's just a book, you know. In general, I don't think it was that hard. Anyway, so back to what's good about young adult books. They're never boring. Yes, sometimes silly or annoying, but not boring, because kids don't have the attention span for boring, and neither does Freida. For example, I recently read an adult book that was spending about 10 pages going nowhere about this random drunk guy in a bar. If this were a young adult book, that scene would have ended 9 pages earlier or left it out entirely. The ones adults manage to remember from their childhood are usually pretty amazing. I mean, if something sticks with you for 20 years, it's gotta be pretty good. So does anyone have any recommendations for a really amazing young adult book? If you want to see what I've already read and enjoyed, you can look at my reading list, blah blah blah. Hurry before I have to read something meant for people my own age. So what we can see from the rest of this post is, like, she seems to just want something quick and simple. The instant gratification, again, is quite revealing. In May 2015, she wrote and released another book. This was co-written with a friend of hers, and it's called Baby City. There are only 3 things in the world that are certain: death, taxes, and babies. Not for me, I will be avoiding the babies, thank you. Nobody knows this truth better than Emily McCoy, a third-year resident working in Baby City, the affectionate nickname for the busy labour and delivery unit at a New York City hospital. On a typical day in Baby City, Emily delivers more babies than the number of hours of sleep she manages to squeeze in that night, and definitely more than the number of dates she's been on since she started her training in OBGYN 2 years earlier. As Emily works tirelessly to safely herald baby after baby after baby after baby into the world, she becomes well acquainted with 3 hard facts of Baby City. 1. Babies never come when you want them to. 2. Babies always come when you don't want them to. And 3. You don't know who your true friends are until your baby is sliding down the birth canal. This was written by Freida McFadden and Kelly Stoddart. Baby City was a joint effort written by myself and Dr. Wu of OBGYN Kenobi. OBGYN. Oh, I get it. Yeah, like Obi-Wan Kenobi, OBGYN Kenobi. Yeah, that's funny. That's her blog, I think. Do you remember the wonderful Dr. Wu who used to blog here? Well, now she's back in book form. This book is all about the real events that take place on a labour and delivery unit based on true stories. This book is the ultimate book for mothers and medicine because it's about mothers, both old and new, and it's written by 2 female physicians who are also mothers. It's light reading, but it deals with a lot of issues that are important to women and mothers and physicians. Side note, we are donating 25% of the profits from the book to the Fistula Foundation, a non-profit organisation that does great things for women in third world countries. I appreciate the charity donation. That's lovely. I cannot fault that. But I do find it funny that, so in the last video I made, it was about Colleen Hoover and her book Woman Down, and it's about how, well, my whole point in the video was about how she wrote this self-insert book, but kept going on about how, like, you know, you don't always need to have the experience of something to be a good author, or do you? And then, like, I make this video, and I cover this, and every single book so far is just Freida writing about herself and her own experiences, and, like, self-inserting herself into her books. Same with her next one, which came out in June 2017, and it was a sequel to her first novel. The Devil You Know? Being a working mum who's also a physician isn't easy, as most of us know. Casey made a blog about it. I have now written a fiction book about it. The Devil You Know by Freida McFadden. This is an almost embarrassingly autobiographical book about how it's tricky balancing a busy career and family and how it can do a number on your marriage. It's a sequel to The Devil Wears Scrubs, but I wrote it so you don't have to read the first book to enjoy it. Again, embarrassingly autobiographical. Oof. She then released another book called Brain Damage and then wrote another book. So between June 2017 and June 2018, she wrote and or released 3 whole books. That is madness. Here's her plea for beta readers for her book after Brain Damage and a little bit of drama surrounding it. Little help? Inspired by a recent burst of sales of my book Brain Damage, I decided to write something new. My newest book is a departure from my others in that the protagonist is not a doctor. It's my first book that is a straight-up women's thriller. The title is The Surrogate Mother. The last time I published, I asked for help with beta reading and got some pretty good opinions. It's already gone through 4 people, so I'm asking for help once again. Anybody interested in reading a thriller written by yours truly and offering a constructive opinion? You must actually want to do it. Please don't do it out of obligation or because you feel sorry for me. You must have read and enjoyed at least one of my other books. The one beta reader I got last time who hadn't read anything by me got halfway through and quit. You must be able to read it in under 1 week, and after reading it, be able to email me your opinions in a coherent way, and not vanish instantly when I ask a follow-up question. If these things hadn't happened to me repeatedly, I wouldn't have to say them, and you must enjoy thrillers. Sorry, but if your beta readers are so bored that they're quitting halfway through, that should maybe tell you something about your book. And having, you must have enjoyed one of my other books before I let you read this, is just kind of wild to me. That's, funny. And while we are on the theme of Freida not liking negative feedback, January 2019, I don't get it. I recently wrote a new women's thriller. I thought of this really great twist for the ending and then kind of worked my way backwards, which is what she does in most of her books, to be honest. It's something that I discuss, I think, in my Dear Debbie video that I'm going to have coming up. The first person who read the book thought the twist was pretty cool, but then my mother read it. I don't understand the ending, she said. What part didn't you understand? All of it. I proceeded to try and explain it to her, and she still didn't understand. After several minutes of this, she said she had a headache and walked away. So I've come up with a brilliant twist. So brilliant, apparently it's impossible to understand. I feel like if your reader, even if that is your mum, can't understand it, maybe it's not that brilliant. Maybe that's something you need to reconsider, you know? Based on timings, I'm going to guess that the book she's referring to is The X, which was released February 2019, but I can't say for certain. I've also not read this book myself, so I can't judge too much. However, I did quickly look up the reviews, and this is one of the first ones that came up. The ending was confusing and poorly written. There was no ending. This book was not clever and the ending was stupid. Too many plot holes and the female characters were not believable. Yeah, Maybe if you want this as a book, I can look into reading and reviewing in the future. But Freida writes so much, it's impossible to stay on top of all of them. So I've just finished writing my review of Dear Debbie, which came out in January, and she's already got another one coming out in May. Like, why is she releasing 4 books a year? This is way too much. She's writing these quicker than I can read and review them, seriously. I just don't understand how someone can write so much so quickly and expect it to be of decent quality. Like, no wonder her books are so bad. Anyway, the last 2 blog posts that I want to look at, because don't worry, we are very nearly done. Freida's complaining about commenters and people who critique her writing and blogs again. So we have October 2011 Weekly Wine Trolls. I really admire Dr. Grumpy because, among other reasons, I've noticed when people make inflammatory comments on his blog, he just ignores them. It's really hard to ignore trolls. They take something you said, often something totally benign, and twist it as an attempt to get you really upset. Often the attacks try to get personal, although how personal can someone who's never met you get? It always kind of baffles me. I mean, what kind of person is so pathetic they need to spend their time trying to upset random strangers on the internet? Get a girlfriend or something. Now that this blog has got more readers, I've gotten a handful of trolls. Less than I thought I'd get, to be honest. Should I be insulted? It is so tempting to take the bait and reply to their inflammatory comments, but then I remember that that's just what they want. So my new mantra is that when a troll comments or emails me, I just laugh at the fact this person wasted their time doing this and ignore it. Thanks, Grumpy, for showing me the way. And then June 2012, Weekly Wine, I'll never read your blog again. Sometimes I'll write something on this blog or another that some readers find offensive. I don't think the things I write are that terribly offensive, so it's probably a matter of the reader having a bit of a chip on their shoulder. I certainly don't expect everyone to agree with everything I say. I always appreciate a respectful argument without any name calling. Here's what bugs me though. When the person writes something like, I find your post incredibly offensive and I'm never going to read your blog again. If I were in a restaurant and trying to make ends meet, threatening to never buy my food again would totally suck. But I don't make money per reader. I don't need more readers to attract advertisers. So why exactly would I want someone who hates my writing to be reading my blog? I prefer they didn't. I feel like my response to that threat should be, thank you. Of course, the implication of writing such a thing is that I will now lose all my readers, because people who constantly say offensive things never attract an audience or their own radio talk show. Oh, how times have changed. Trisha Paytas. Actually, the truth is, when I write something offensive, it's basically a guarantee of a big jump in my hits and lots of new followers. But I don't do it that much because I don't feel like it's the purpose of this blog. Anyway, here's an idea. If you ever decide to not read this blog anymore, just stop reading. No need to inform me of your decision in a dramatic fashion. And I'm super conflicted about these posts and what I think of them, because on the one hand, I kind of agree with her. I understand where she's coming from, and I think she makes some great points. If a blog post or something isn't for you, just move on. You don't need to announce it. That's absolutely fine. When you're consuming content for free, whether that's on a blog or YouTube or whatever it is, I don't think you necessarily need to be cruel for the sake of it and make a point of telling the creator, I don't like you, I don't want to watch this, I don't want to read this. You know what I mean? I think it's okay for something to not be your taste and just move on and find something that is your taste. You know what I mean? I know I've never really felt a need to tell someone directly that I didn't like their content on like YouTube or something, or a blog, because I just think it comes across as a bit mean, doesn't it? But on the other hand, when it's a paid for product, like, you know, a book or a film or something like that, or a TV series you're watching on like a streaming service or whatever, like, I think there's a difference between like leaving a comment directly for the creator and leaving a review, because a review is not for a creator. A review of like a paid product is for the other consumers, you know? It's for the readers, consumers, watchers, whatever, to decide whether they want to spend their time or money on this thing. And so that's what I think the difference is between like a review and a direct comment to the creator. Yeah, I think there's differences. I guess what I'm saying is, like, I have a lot of empathy for Freida having to read negative comments, but on the other hand, when she admits that she sometimes writes offensive things to gain attention, that does bother me, and I feel less empathy for her for that. So overall, it's complicated, it's nuanced. And that's all I want to cover for today. I know this was long, there's a lot to cover. There's still many, many more blog posts I didn't cover. But if you want to check out the document, you can. It's linked below, and you can read through and tell me what you think of certain ones if you want. I do feel like through reading these blogs, I got to know Freida more as a person, even if I don't know her name or anything like that still. I feel like I know her more as an individual rather than just a bad author. Some parts of her I actually found myself really liking and respecting, which surprised me because I didn't think I would. Other parts kind of made me dislike her more. I liked understanding where she got her inspiration from her books and her writing process and things like that. And I think that's made me... It's definitely influenced how I review her books. So in my review of Dear Debbie, I'm not sure if I was more or less critical because of what I understand now. It's hard to say. Because spoiler, Dear Debbie is her worst book yet. It is so damn bad. It's terrible. But I don't know if I was harsher because I know her writing process a bit more, or if I was like a bit more lenient with her. I don't know. You know what? You'll have to watch that video when I do make it, and then you can tell me. But for now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on these blogs. If you've made it through this far, thank you so much for sticking with me. Thank you for being so patient with me while I've been going through this grieving process of losing Koo and struggling quite a lot. Thank you so much for everyone who's been kind and supportive and wonderful. But yeah, if you'd like to see more of me, you can go follow me over on Instagram. I've also got Patreon where you can support this channel or channel memberships. And yeah, thank you so much for watching today. I appreciate you guys a lot, and I'll see you again soon. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.